And a lot of people no longer play Michael Jackson because of that, or R. Kelly because of that. Lots of people absolutely loved R. Kelly's
Well, the
music.
Revs say a lot of his stuff is played in church still, too. Let's go to Rob in Framingham. You're next on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for the call. Hey, Rob.
Hey guys, yeah, I was just telling you, Screener, that basically when your old radio station lets you go as a man in his mid-40s, I just stopped listening to hip hop altogether.
There you go. There you go, Rob. Oh, he's talking about our station flipped to hip hop. You know, it's really terrible.
Marjorie doesn't like us to say we were fired, but everybody was fired. The whole station, was fired and replaced by hip hop.
You know, Rob, I appreciate that because you know who listened to that station all the time after they flipped? My children.
Yeah.
They were all listening to hip-hop on 96.9. Isn't that disgraceful?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but I'm still going strong after all these years.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I'm not listening to the old station either, Rob, so we're in the same place. Thank you for listening to this station. 877-301-8970. Let me tell you what, the first caller had said, most of us slide back into convenience at the end of the day. The easier people make it for people like us who sort of intend to do the right thing, but don't go as far out of our way as we should to do the right thing. The AFL-CIO, when I was the union president, the AFL-CIO used to, actually it was after I was union president, they used to publish something on their website of every company that had engaged in horrible labor practices. So it's sort of easy rule of thumb, a list to consult to decide who to do business with and who not to do business with. So really good service could be provided that would put together a comprehensive list of people doing unkind things to other people who probably don't deserve your business,
Well, the other thing is, we talked a lot about Apple's unfair practices in China with child labor and all that kind of stuff, and how we were all going to not buy Apple phones and Apple computers and Apple everything else. But I think very few of us actually stuck to that promise. But then you found out that other computer companies were also doing some.
How relieved were you when you found that out, that they're all equally bad? Boy, that was a real huge relief.
But this is kind of the thing, or these products or practices are such an ingrained part of your life, you can't bear to give them up.
Well, yeah, but the message we send, I know this is obvious, so why are you stating it, Jim? I have no idea. The obvious message is when a company does, or an individual does a horrible thing, or a set of horrible things, if there's not a negative reaction, you know what the message is? You can get away with this forever. You can continue to do unconscionable kinds of things. And I think a company like Adidas sort of tested the waters, realized there was a huge uproar, so they had no choice but to dump Kanye West. But when people like you and me complain about the business practices of somebody, Amazon, by the way, is one of the most anti-union companies in the country. Other than that huge win in Staten Island, another union effort was lost. I think it was in upstate New York last week. You read the literature coming out from Amazon, it's as horribly anti-union as anybody is, and we're rewarding that behavior and saying it's perfectly fine to do it, Jeff Bezos, because we still shop there.
We got a bunch of great texts here. I boycott Hobby Lobby due to their anti-LGBTQ policies. That's Marianne.
If I knew what they did, I'd boycott them too.
I think they sell hobby type stuff.
Well, that's why they're called Hobby
Lobby. Exactly.
And
they were also anti-birth control. Remember they made the big stink about birth control and the Affordable Care Act. And I did wonder if anybody in the Hobby Lobby hierarchy had many children, because that would make them kind of suspicious in their opposition to birth control, as a lot of Republican senators or congresspeople that have multiple children would be suspicious. I'll say this for Cipollone,
Pat Cipollone,
the lawyer
former general counsel,
10 kids.
He does have 10 kids?
10 kids, yeah. And here's another good one. When the owner of Patagonia sold business for climate protection, I immediately went and purchased products from them. That was a great gesture, the guy that runs the whole company. And
here's another easy one. I've done this one. This is not signed, unfortunately. I stopped watching Kevin Spacey movies, which was a blow because I loved American Beauty and The Negotiator, one of the great political dramas ever also on television.
Oh, yeah.
877-301-8970 is our phone number.
L.A. Confidential, that was a great movie, too.
Was that him?
Yeah, Kevin Spacey.
I don't think I ever saw that.
That was a good movie. He was in it, too. With Kim Basinger.
Whatever happened to her?
I don't know. She's probably enjoying her life. I'm sure she did very well in the movies, and she doesn't have to worry about working a day in her life. Plus, she'll probably get a pretty good divorce settlement, too.
From whom?
From her gorgeous, handsome husband.
Who's her gorgeous, handsome husband?
Oh, God, who's her handsome husband?
Mr. Bassinger.
Alec Baldwin.
Alec Baldwin was
Baldwin.
married to Kim Bassinger?
You don't remember that?
How did I miss that?
Don't you remember the big ruckus when he yelled at their 12-year-old daughter?
That was their daughter? The kid that with the tape when he's screaming at the daughter?
And I disgraced myself by giving a fawning interview to Alec Baldwin when he called Boston Public Radio, but that's water under the bridge at this point. You're listening to Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. We're streaming at youtube.com.
As rents surge in Worcester, people have no choice but to leave the city.
I missed it before I left. I walked around my house and cried. I raised my family in that city. It's squeezing out the lower class.
Officials in nearby communities are noticing the effects.
There's definitely more people traveling on the roads, more people at the grocery store.
I'm Sam Turkin, the latest in our series, Priced Out, Thursday on GBH's Morning Edition.
Funding for our programs comes from you and the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds for the citizens and businesses of the Commonwealth. You can see if you have unclaimed money at findmassmoney.com. And Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, offering MedX Medicare supplement plans that include no referrals, worldwide travel coverage, and the ability to see any doctor that accepts Medicare. BlueCrossMA.com/go.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We've had this discussion with you through the years many a time. Today's discussion was prompted by Adidas finally terminating its relationship, $250 million worth of a relationship with Kanye West because of his anti-Semitic remarks and I don't know if the White Lives Matter t-shirt had something to do with it. And the question is, do you patronize individuals and businesses who do good things, like Adidas has now done, and avoid companies that do ones that are socially irresponsible? Here's Aaron from Dartmouth. I've quit 2 different podcasts that advertise nicotine products, and I stopped listening to Malcolm Gladwell after I heard a Walmart ad. How weird is it to see him in advertisements, by the way? It's really, really strange. 877-301-8970. We're told our phones we're having a bit of a problem with, so if you want to text us, which a lot of you are doing, you can do this as we get through the phone storm here.
Here is a good American. Listen to this. This is Peter from the North Shore. He's boycotting Goya. Lots of people talk about that.
I don't buy Goya either.
Yeah, due to their CEO's support of Trump's efforts to destroy our democracy. But more significant examples. Listen to this. He's got solar panels. We have not had an electric bill in 20 months. Mini splits heat and cool the house, so no burning home fuel oil. Electric car on order, which means no more fuel bill. Will be off fossil fuel. Another significant example, we've stopped eating beef, pork, and lamb because of the damage to the climate, health, and moral reasons. Okay.
That's pretty impressive. 877-301-8970. Do you buy Goya beans? I do market baskets, every Saturday morning. The problem is they don't have all the beans together. They have Goya as one separate aisle, and then you got to leave that aisle and go find beans of another variety elsewhere.
Yeah.
But it's doable.
Yeah, I haven't bought any beans lately, so I don't think I have bought any Goya beans. I haven't bought any beans at all. But listen to this. We have a lot of really upstanding listeners. This is Joy from Marion. Says, I've not purchased anything from Walmart since 2005. I'm a retired nurse. The patients who work for Walmart had terrible insurance, and the rest are paid so poorly that taxpayers subsidize the company with Medicaid while the owners pull in billions. That is a great point, that taxpayers who are struggling right now with inflation and fuel bills and everything else are subsidizing companies like Walmart because they pay their workers so little that they qualify for government help through
So we're
food stamps.
subsidizing, you're right. Here's a good one. I would starve before I'd eat at Chick-fil-A. There's one right down the street because of their anti-LGBTQ agenda and their support of conversion. camps. I didn't know about the conversion camps. That's pretty bad. This is Tim on a Peloton bike in Beverly. I've started boycotting the Salvation Army at Christmas time because of their attitudes towards LGBTQ individuals as well. Our number, I don't even know why I'm giving the number because the phone lines are not working.
Yeah.
Can we call this a call-in segment when nobody can call in?
I don't think so. It's
no.
only a text-in segment.
yeah.
Thank goodness we have texting. You know why, Jim? If
No.
we have the text, you know what we'd be doing? We'd be just talking to each other for like a half an hour, which would be really difficult.
No, I
wouldn't
don't.
it?
Can I tell you my position? Because, I'm really tolerant of these kinds of things. The fact that the phones don't work again is really, the beauty of me is I'm not bothered by it at all. I mean, it is really amazing how measured and even I am. And even things that would have historically gotten me angry don't have any effect on me whatsoever.
Actually, his head is about to explode, but we don't want to say anything about that. Oh, you know what's Kevin Spacey's big thing? House of Cards.
I just said that. One of the great political dramas.
Yes, we watch that incessantly.
Yes, no, but in all fairness, it's not that hard to avoid him because he got in trouble after a season and they scrapped him for the following season. They had Robin, what's her name, was the lead character.
Yep.
And so you really didn't, unless you wanted to rewatch things from the past, it wasn't really hard to avoid Spacey on what was one of the great political shows of all time.
I have a big announcement.
What's that? The phones are working?
I think the phones are working again, I hope. 877-301-8970. It's difficult, as you point out, Jim, to have a talker with people when you can't talk to them.
Can't talk to them,
Can't talk to them, that's right. DA from Bellrica refuses to go to Starbucks and McDonald's since they didn't pull out of Russia immediately when Ukraine was invaded.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
By the way, can you give us that? That's a fabulous list. Can you find out that guy? I can't remember his name and I feel bad about it. He was at Harvard. He's one of the heads of Yale Management. He and some of his colleagues did a fabulous thing about companies that were full of you-know-what vis-a-vis Russia after the invasion.
There's an app called Boycott. I'm not sure if it's B-U-Y. The emailer is texting
As
it
in
as
boycott.
Boycott. But according to this texter, it makes it much easier for people to vote with their dollar by scanning a barcode. That way, huge companies can't hide behind the smaller brands because the app will show the parent company and help you decipher those hidden companies. It allows you as a consumer to choose which campaigns you care about, such as animal cruelty, GMOs, and others. It's either Boycott, B-U-Y-C-O-T-T,
Maybe we
or
can
Boycott.
check. By the way, we should take these calls quickly because the phone lines will probably be down again in a minute. Marion Dover, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Thanks for your patience. Hi.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me.
Well, thank
Love
you.
the show.
By the way, if you want to call the show again in the future and the phone lines aren't working, just call Marjorie Sell and we'll put you on. Go ahead, Mary. What's up?
So, yeah, I was thinking about football and watching football and how, there is all these documented concussions and people, having dementia from playing football and how we still watch it and, support the NFL financially. And we're not doing anything about that.
Well, with one exception, if you listen to the Revs, who are usually with us on Mondays, Emmett G. Price III, Reverend Emmett G. Price III, is a huge football fan, and he does not watch the NFL because of the very issue you talk about. And by the way, I care a lot about the concussion thing, and I am a violator, Mary, like you're talking. I watched 15 minutes of the Patriots game last night. That's a wonderful example, Mary, of where people should do the right thing. Thank you for the call.
Someone just said, they texted and said, I do what I can. And that's better than not doing anything at all. This person doesn't watch any movies or TV shows with members of Scientology cult Tom Cruise, John Travolta. However, I'm just as much of a hypocrite as any other human being because I continue to buy single-use plastic water bottles. And that's how this person defends himself, by saying, I do what I can.
Yeah, I think the bottom line at the end of the day, I know this sounds like an excuse, is essentially what you have to decide to do is drink water and grow your own food. Isn't that, and I used to make leather belts, you know that. I was a leather merchant in Provincetown.
A leather merchant in Provincetown.
No, seriously,
Those
you make
were
your
the
own
glory
clothes
days.
and you
Yep.
grow your own food.
You have to be off the grid, Jim.
Yeah.
But it's getting easier and easier to get off the grid. The person that said, well, I don't know how much it costs for solar panels. I think they're, even with the rebates, are still kind of expensive. You have to have for the right kind of house. But lots of us can eventually transition over to the heat pumps, et cetera. They're not cheap.
Have you done that, by the way? We've been talking to Bill McKibben about it for a year now.
I haven't done it yet, no.
When are you doing it?
Well, I have to get the guy over to look at the gas
When's the guy
burner.
coming over? Oh, the guy called me. He said your phone lines weren't working. As soon as the phone was working, he'd give you a buzz.
He's coming at the beginning of November.
He is?
La-dee-da.
You know why he's not coming to November? He's coming to my house next week. Let's go and see before the phones all disappear.
Bill in the
By the
car.
way, the guy at Yale who does this fabulous work is Jeffrey with a J Sonnenfeld, Sonnenfeld. Google him. Google Sonnenfeld and Russia and Ukraine, and you'll find out which companies were full of it and which were honorable and principled vis-a-vis Russia's assault on Ukraine.
Bill in the car. What do you think, Bill?
Hey, Bill, welcome.
Good morning, Jim and Marjorie.
Yeah.
The question is, why does it take Adidas so long to drop Kanye?
Sure.
This has been going on for weeks. And you know what it comes down to? The bottom line is money, right? In all of these cases, and it always has been in the United States. And if we thought about it, if we could get ourselves wrapped around this whole economy thing, it has nothing to do with whether you have a D in front of your name for Democrat or R for Republican. It's really the C for consumer. And if we all just got together as consumers and decided we were going to boycott a particular company, or even a state where these companies go to headquarters and they move around wherever they can get the big deal. General Electric came to Massachusetts a number of years ago, and now the company's non-existent. But again, the states give breaks to these companies. Tesla's moved to Texas. How many have moved to Texas? They have an oil economy which supports anything. You know, consumers can't stick together, though. We're all about our own money in our pocket. That's sad to say.
By the way, why don't you
really
form
care
the
about the
Consumer
moral value.
Party? You're a genius, Bill. You are totally right. That would cross at least some lines. And thank you for your thoughts. We appreciate your call.
There was briefly some sports teams that wouldn't go to, I believe it was Indiana, because of their gay rights stuff.
Why, wasn't it North Carolina too? Didn't they cancel
North Carolina.
the NBA All-Star game
Yeah.
or some such thing? So would you go to Florida now? I mean, you're not a big DeSantis fan. He could not be worse to LGBTQ people. Frankly, he could not be worse to virtually a whole swath of people. Would you go to Florida?
Well, one of my best friends lives in Florida, and you know what?
I thought you said she's moving out.
She is.
Because of that?
Because of the politics down there and because of anti-Semitism.
Oh, you told me that,
She's
yeah.
Jewish.
Yeah, you told me that.
And she's gone down there her whole life because her parents bought a place 1,000,000 years ago, and she's gone there since she was a child. And she said the climate and the anti-Semitism and just the turn of the state being run by Ron DeSantis is just, she can't take it anymore.
You know, the prior caller, and my apologies, I forgot your name. You started your call by saying that Adidas was essentially dragged kicking and screaming to the right decision. And I think that's important to note so that people don't think it was just an act of benevolence. But after one says that, they did do the right thing. And the question is, do you then reward them for doing the right thing if it took them a while to get there? And I would answer that question in the affirmative, because you want to encourage people to do good things. And the way to do it is to say, we got it. It took you a while to get there, but you did get there. And so as a result, I'm going to buy a pair.
Okay, we're going to talk to Shirley Young because the phones are on, the phones are off. We don't know what the phones are doing. So we're not going to have phone calls with Shirley Young so we can talk to her. She's next. Boston Globe columnist Shirley Young. She's going to give us her take on the so-called Millionaire's tax and a bunch of other business news. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting as we do every Tuesday and every Friday from the Boston Public Library. And we are also streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Western Sahara, Africa's last colony. Refugees from there were displaced by a conflict that few people even know about. And for the past 40 years, they've been living across the border in Algeria in a temporary camp. These people have struggled to get their story told, but they've come up with a novel way to get the word out, a film festival and a filmmaking school in the middle of the desert. We attend the Sahara Film Festival on the World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Sunbug Solar, a full-service local solar energy company helping to grow renewable energy in Massachusetts since 2009. To learn more about current solar energy employment opportunities, visit sunbugsolar.com. And Skylark Vocal Ensemble, presenting a modern choral masterwork, Path of Miracles, this Thursday through Sunday in Sandwich, Cambridge, Newton, and Newburyport. Tickets at skylarkensemble.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined now by Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Young. She's been writing a lot about the millionaire's tax. Proponents don't like that term. They call it the Fair Share Amendment on the ballot, and has done some brilliant work talking about some of the incredible leaders who have done similar things on the graduated income tax, sometimes unsuccessfully, in the past. Shirley, it's great to see you.
Good to see you.
That's right. We're going to play some sound in a couple of minutes from Baby Jim back in 1994 when he was trying to do some shenanigans up there on the State House as well. So you wrote a great column about this, the whole so-called millionaire's tax. But why don't we just start? Why don't we just start with the fearless, heroic leader? Here's Jim Browdy back in 1994 on Talk of New England, talking about his efforts to, what was your tax then? The graduated income tax? The graduated income tax didn't go well for Jim, but nonetheless, here he is.
The taxation should be based on ability to pay, and it's not in Massachusetts. Part of the proposal, it is true we want to eliminate the provision in the Constitution that says that low and middle income people pay at the same rate as millionaires. That's unfair. What we also do in this proposal is double things like the child care credit, provide $53 million in water and property tax relief to low and middle income people, reward long-term investment in Massachusetts job-creating businesses. So it's a reform of the whole income tax system. It's not just good for people's pocketbooks, but we believe very good for the economy as well.
What year was that guy saying that?
Went down in flames in 1994.
How compelling. Can you try to be objective for 1 second? How compelling was that guy's argument?
It was terrible. But here's a better one. And I can relate to this. This is the late, great Barbara Anderson, who was an anti-tax crusader. Some of you may remember her. I loved her. I get on the phone reporting on these things. Jim doesn't remember me, of course. That's how much of an impression I made. Calling him about these things when I was a reporter at the Herald. I talked to him, and he sounded pretty good. Then I talked to Barbara Anderson and get all fired up. You know why? Because she knows what it's like to be stepped all over your sentences by Jim Browdy, just like I do. So here's Barbara Anderson and Jim in another 1994 appearance. This is on WHDH.
An organization like Jim Browdy's team, which is made up of the public employee unions and the welfare lobbyists, are for it. And the reason for that is none of that is real. All of those statistics, all of those tax cuts, all of those tax breaks are tricks to get people to vote to change the Constitution. What you showed on the screen...
Tricks known as a law.
Excuse me,
a law.
Please, while I speak.
Excuse me. I speak.
Don't interrupt me while I speak, says Barbara Anderson. So that sound wasn't very good. We couldn't hear that clearly.
We
Jim.
might explain why we're playing this. We're playing this for two reasons. One,
because you
to
lost.
humiliate me.
That's right.
And two, because you did a really interesting piece, Shirley, comparing the effort to do the millionaire's tax, which is a variation on a graduated income tax, different rates for higher income people, with the prior efforts, 5 of them, the most recent of which I led unsuccessfully in 1994.
And the reason why I wanted to look at the last attempt to change the income tax, to get rid of the flat income tax rate in Massachusetts is because of all the times I've been on this show and hearing about Jim's failed 1994 effort. And by
the way, you don't have to say failed every time. You could just say Jim's effort in 1994.
No, I think it was 42 points he lost by, wasn't it? Like
it turns out it wasn't that bad.
30?
She did research. It was only 39.
It was right. It was only
39.
Though I told Jim that's actually in line with the other attempts. I mean, it was a really wide margin, and so I wanted to look back in 1994 and look at why did that effort fail, and are there any lessons for or insights into what might happen in 2022? And when I look back, I was like, it was so different in 1994. There were a lot of reasons why you lost. Number one, can you believe this? Your grad tax effort, it was not just one question, it was 2 questions.
Too confusing.
Question 6 and question 7. And when you looked at that 1994 debate, I mean, did you, I don't know if you had a chance to watch it, but remember when they would flash the charts, they would say, well, there's actually 3 income levels, and this is the impact. 92% would go, 92% of taxpayers would have their taxes cut, and 8% would go up. But you're looking at this, I mean, you were asking voters a lot to digest a lot. First, question 6 was to get rid of the flat income tax.
Correct.
And then you had to vote for question 7, which would set the new rates. And so it was just
that brilliant
too much.
strategy was mine, by the way.
It was too much.
Confusing.
You gave too much ammunition to the opponents. And you saw it in the polls. Every single poll, the more voters learned about the grad tax,
the less they liked it.
The less they liked it, the more confused they got. And in a week before the election, the polls indicated that you were going to lose, and you did. And actually, the polls looked like it was going to be closer, but it was you lost by a landslide. But the other
why do you have to keep saying landslide? You've said it like 12 times.
Other thing
One
that
of
was
the
really,
biggest in Massachusetts history, actually.
The other thing that I think the reason why, the reason why I think this time is different is because last time the opponents outraised the supporters.
And they
3
had
to
Barbara
1.
Anderson.
And you had Barbara
such,
Anderson.
She
Yes.
was such a great spokesperson for her cause.
Right.
I mean, she just said, "Don't believe a word out of Jim Browdy's mouth." I mean, let's face it,
you
that's what she
didn't.
said.
Right.
And I didn't. I was
How'd you
skeptical.
vote on the graduating income tax in 1994?
I don't remember.
And the other thing,
I was a young mother at
so
the
Barbara
time.
Anderson passed away. She passed away in
Yes, she did.
2016. That's
Great
why,
lady.
That's why she's not around to try to defeat question 1. But also Bill Weld was, when you looked at the clips, Bill Weld was running for
Very
re-election. Almost at every turn, he was like, "No new taxes. I'm cutting taxes. This is a terrible idea." And today, you don't have Charlie Baker's not running for re-election.
Right.
He's virtually silent on it. I mean, I actually had to.
Did you get Bill Weld?
I
Yes,
did
you
talk
did.
to Bill
Yeah, I
Weld.
thought so, yeah.
And he still hates. Graduated tax,
Yep.
and he was very clear. I'm voting no against question 1, and the reason why he's like he thinks that voters, once you give them a taste of increase in taxes, and the legislature, they'll keep doing it.
Well,
again.
can I tell you something? I have 2 things to say about this. Since I don't know if you know, I did this and was crushed. Did you know that? You probably don't know that. Sorry, you probably wasn't aware of the outcome.
I saw that
No.
picture of you. I saw this picture of Jim. Someone sent him this huge bouquet the day after the election. It was
Dead
about 3
flowers.
feet tall,
It's true.
3 feet wide.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Dead
Thank you.
flowers.
Okay, I have 2
Brilliant.
things to say about this. I have great respect for Bill Weld. He has no idea what he's talking about. And the reason he doesn't, when I did it, where the rates would have been set not by Constitution, but by statute, he potentially was right, meaning if we get our foot in the door, the legislature is going to raise taxes for lower income people. There are 2 pieces of brilliance by the proponents here, which is what separates them from my miserably failed effort in 1994. 2 things.
It wasn't that bad.
1, the rate changes for people who make more than $1 million a year only is in the Constitution. The legislature has 0 power to extend rate increases to anybody else. They have to do it in the Constitution. That's number 1. Number 2, the other mistake we made, ours was revenue neutral.
Yes,
Raise taxes
right,
on the wealthy,
right.
cut taxes on everybody else. However, what they did here is they're raising anywhere from $1.3 to $2 billion a year, and they're spending it on transportation and education.
Right.
So you're not just taxing the rich, which is appealing to people, and not you, meaning you won't be taxed more. But secondly, the money we raise is being spent on 2 things that virtually everybody cares about.
Supposedly.
Yeah. Well, the revenue neutral was also a mistake because it just became an exercise in wealth redistribution.
Exactly, it did.
Now there's an incentive.
I agree.
You know, if you raise the taxes on the highest earners, you get some. You are supposed to or expected to get something out of it.
By the way,
That is
we're
one of
doing
the
a
big
debate here
debates.
on Monday. Is it 11 to 12, Jamie? 11 to 12 on Monday. We're doing a question 1 debate, proponents, opponents, and the difference between prior debates on this. You can call in. And if you want to ask the proponents or the opponents questions or make arguments for or against, you will have an opportunity. That's Monday, 11 to 12.
You know what, though? I have a lot of empathy for voters who don't do what we do for a living, because if you look at these ads, they say the first ad on this is black and the next ad on this is white. So they're just diametrically opposed, and I think it's very hard for people to figure these things out.
And I'm going to say I think there's hyperbole on both sides. You know, but that's what happens in ballot campaigns.
Well, except, I guess that is probably true. What's the most recent polling? You said you had seen some polling?
Yes, the polling says that it's question 1 is slated to pass 58% by
Wow.
modest margin. But the thing is, I think it was higher before. It was like in the 70s, right? And
Almost always
right.
comes
It's
down,
come
yeah.
down, and so I think in the end, I think the effort to get rid of the flat income tax rate, I think it's closest. My conclusion, I think it's closer than it's ever been.
It is. Now, let me just say one last thing, and we never give away in advance a question we're going to ask a politician. One of the first questions I'm going to ask Maura Healey on Thursday when she's here at 11 o'clock, which I think would insulate the proponents, depending on what she says, from a lot of the criticism. The primary criticism of this ballot question is you can't guarantee, which is technically correct, that the $1.3 to $2 billion will be spent on these things because they can do it as replacement money, meaning instead of giving $1 billion new dollars of transportation, they give them $1 billion and take away $1 billion and put it into something else. If Maura Healey says, and I'm amazed they haven't gotten her to say it already, if I am elected governor on November 8th, I will pledge now to veto any effort by the legislature to divert one nickel away from the money that's raised.
She doesn't like to take pledges.
Well, let's see if she does. And if she doesn't, I assume that creates an opening for the opponents. And if she does, I think it pretty much locks in their argument that if people vote for this,
maybe we should make a bet. I don't think she's going to make a pledge.
I will make that same bet, and I will say that I think she will.
Okay.
I think she will.
So, Shirley, then you deserve a lot of credit talking about the
By the way,
role-
can I clarify one thing before we leave this because it wasn't made clear? What was the outcome in 1994?
69% no.
And so that means only like 30% yes. And who led that campaign? I did. Okay.
Yeah, and Barbara Anderson, who said, Jim, don't interrupt me while I'm speaking, Jim. That was Barbara Anderson. Boy, I was a big fan of hers.
She was what most powerful unelected official in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
They called her.
By the way, since you're talking about it, I don't remember. There was another guy who had a ballot campaign against Barbara Anderson in 1990 where you couldn't make up your mind.
That's right.
He won that one. Who was that?
That would have been you, Jim.
That would be me.
Yeah.
But
did
something bad happen?
Sort of bad happened. Here's what the deal was, which is one of the reasons why I have occasionally some antipathy for the legislature. I am hired to run this tax reform group in 1987. And actually, it's celebrating its 35th anniversary.
We called him the
tomorrow
Raise
night.
Your Tax Man.
No, I was a tax equity person. It was called the Tax Equity Alliance for Massachusetts.
Raise your taxes.
Team. Marjorie, am I trying to say something here? What's the deal? So as I was saying, here's the deal. The legislature,
Here's the deal.
When I'm meeting with legislators and my board is meeting, we can't raise taxes because of Barbara Anderson. We can't raise taxes because of Barbara Anderson. So they finally raised taxes in 1990. Barbara Anderson proposes to repeal them, which would have been the single largest percentage budget cut on the ballot in United States history. We win the ballot question, protecting the taxes. And what does the legislature do right after we win? They repeal the taxes that they themselves passed that the voters voted 60-40 to protect. So that is what happened on that question.
Okay.
In any case, we're done with that.
Okay. People think you sound much better now than you did in 1994, Jim. I just want to point that out.
Well, because I'm chastened. I don't know if you know, I lost 69-31. Did you say that? Okay, let's
You
move
had a
on.
lot more hair. I didn't recognize
I did
you.
have a lot more hair.
You had a lot more hair.
Thank you for that, too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But the voice, the voice, I mean, the
voice is the same.
The voice is the
Oh,
same.
you put on a little weight in the intervening years, too, now that I look at you. Okay.
I didn't say that. I just said you had more hair.
I could read your
just said
eyes.
you
I
had
know
more
what you're
hair.
saying.
He did. He had a lot of hair.
He had a
didn't
lot of hair. I didn't recognize
A lot of
it.
hair.
I actually proposed my editor, we should run a photo of Jim Browdy. Back then you were known as James Browdy.
Well, I was James.
No, not Jim. James Browdy.
Yeah, much more serious.
But then it was like, people probably wouldn't recognize it.
I was aggravated. Yeah, Bill Weld's photo in
So
the big
Bill-
thing. He had, not mine, which I
Yeah,
thought
we
was...
ended up running with Bill Weld. 'Cause it was like people know who Bill Weld is.
And no one knows who I am.
Well, they
exactly.
wouldn't reckon. Bill Weld hasn't changed as
He
dramatically
still has a lot of hair.
as
Okay.
James Browdy.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
Who?
So, okay, moving on. Anything you'd like to say
No,
before we move on?
I don't want to say anything I have.
Okay.
Go ahead.
You deserve a lot of credit for pointing out the lack of women in important positions, state boards, heads of companies, and so forth. You had an update on how women are doing. More than half of prominent state boards and commissions
This is actually great.
have women on them.
Leading them.
They chair
them,
more
chair
than
them.
half. And so
Excuse me.
of the 50 most prominent boards, this is a real win for the state of Massachusetts. Of course, not just me, but a lot of women's groups, a lot of nonprofits have really put a lot of energy into getting the state and Charlie Baker to put more women on boards and lead them. And, so this group called EOS Foundation, they've
EOS,
been,
right?
EOS. They've been tracking the number of women on state boards and commissions, and also number of people of color, and so they track the power gap, what they call the power gap in Massachusetts, and I give a lot of credit to them to putting it to doing the work, right? Because what gets measured gets done. YW Boston has been very active, in a number of nonprofits as well, in terms of pushing the state to diversify its boards.
Two things about this when I read your story. Three things. One, nobody has been a greater advocate in the press for women moving into high positions in the corporate world and this world than you, and so you deserve a lot of credit here. So does Baker.
Yes.
And I have to say, the thing that was most shocking to me about your story, I think I got this right, is you said, were it not for EOS, is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah,
EOS. We wouldn't even know about this.
Right.
Yeah.
Why would a government that is doing the right thing, I understand why you'd want to hide it if it was all white guys chairing these commissions. But when finally we have a majority of women, why aren't they voluntarily disclosing this?
What I learned was that the Baker administration does, of course, track it internally. And when I presented EOS's numbers, they then
confirmed them?
They shared their numbers. And what they showed was that a lot of the governor does a lot of the appointments right now, and the majority of the appointments. And according to the Baker administration, since coming into the office in January 2015, the governor's made about 3,500 appointments, and of those, slightly more than half have been women. And nearly a quarter are people of color, people from diverse backgrounds, people of color, LGBT, also people with disabilities. And so he's a champion of this, and I'm glad.
But there's no dashboard where you can go find
I
this.
don't think so. But when I asked the question, they did provide numbers, and
Well,
so
good for him.
that is something that the Baker administration. I mean, when Baker was in the private sector, I mean, he championed women, and
What's the name of that group?
Boston Club, and so
which publishes the number of women and people of color
on
corporate boards
and
right.
CEOs, and he was he was very active in that
Harvard
group,
Pilgrim.
and Harvard Pilgrim, and he was honored, and so if you look at his own administration, his own cabinet, there's a lot of women in leadership roles.
So your colleague Janelle Nanos has got a really sad story about people struggling now with inflation, the cost of energy, etc. Quote, some poor woman, 70-year-old in Gloucester, is on a fixed income. She said she can barely get through the month. She's hitting rock bottom every single solitary month. It also talks about the Massachusetts spending a lot less money now than they used to on things like rental voucher programs. So what's the bottom line here?
I mean, I think it's the squeezing of the middle class. That really is the kind of, I think, the main issue in the governor's race, from the high cost of housing to higher health care costs to skyrocketing higher education. And so she did a story through the lens of, and this is built on our own polls, 50, I think the latest polls showed that 56% of the people we polled, are really concerned about their financial situation, and so the economy is really weighing heavily on not just lower income households, but the middle class in Massachusetts.
I've said to Marjorie, I think I've said on the air that I was watching the debate the other night on NBC 10 and you guys and BUR and I can't remember the fourth sponsor, Telemundo, I think it was. In any case, the final debate in the governor's race, and the first comment made by Maura Healey, which you don't hear from many Democrats, was how she was going to cut taxes.
Yeah.
And this is why. I mean, I'm not either defending nor am I criticizing her. I'm just observing it's unusual to hear a Democrat running for governor to say that kind of thing, especially in a blue state. But I think it's her attempt to say right out of the box, I hear you. I hear you. And what Janelle does in that piece is she breaks down every single area, from healthcare to rent to whatever, the whole panoply of areas where the middle class is getting croaked, even in a state like Massachusetts.
Well, I think she also said she's cutting taxes because she's also in favor of question one,
Probably
raising
right.
taxes on the highest earners.
Yeah. So you have two. How old are your kids again?
9 and 11.
Are they aware that Halloween candy is smaller than it was for the exact same price a couple of years ago? Which it is. Do you know that?
They do not know it. They're just so happy when they have a piece of chocolate in their mouth. They're just so happy, or Skittles.
Yeah, where did this story appear? Because I'll tell you, we're reading a story in anticipation of you coming.
Washington Post.
Washington Post. The incredible part for a paper that's as great as the Washington Post, they seem to buy the notion that one of the reasons these companies are doing this is because they finally got the message about obesity in America. No, I'm serious. It's like half the story. Does anybody think they're doing it to protect the health of the consumer?
Well, have you noticed? I've noticed this in some places I get takeout from. The takeout portions are smaller.
Yeah, I think everything, it's shrinkflation.
Shrinkflation, absolutely.
Higher prices and smaller portions. But you know how...
Or to avoid higher prices in some cases.
What happened to my shrimp scampi? There's only a few little shreds.
Well, do you know what I started, a tradition during the pandemic since 2020?
What's that?
At my house, Halloween, we give out full-size candy bars.
You're kidding.
We started that in 2020.
You are very generous.
And no, it's great. It's really fun giving out full-size candy bars.
Because the kids are so excited.
They're so excited, and I like buying them. Of course, what did I went to Costco. I bought them the first week of October because it was on sale, and so we have so far we have 180 full-size candy bars in my basement.
Now, why do you do that?
Why?
Do you give out full-size?
No, she said why, not you.
Because in 2020 was the first year of the pandemic,
Yeah.
and remember we were all cooped up, and we were all debating, should we have Halloween or not? I said, okay, let's do it. And I figured we wouldn't have that many kids, right? So it's like I might as well get full-size bars.
Remember we were talking about.
Well, then 2020 was a huge was a huge year, and I kept it up. No, I have more than 108 kids. I bet I have 200 or 300. I think I might run out. So I don't. Not everybody will get full-size candy bars. If you come after 7 o'clock, after 7:30, you probably won't get the full-size.
Remember we were debating how to do it on Halloween. The pandemic. You're going to get some big
bags,
long
right.
claw and hand it out.
No, we did that. We had houses that built chutes from the second floor, and then but it was great if you went out in 2020 because remember they didn't want people to grab.
That's right.
Grab the candy bar. So my kids got Ziploc bags full of candy. So they got 10 pieces of candy. They cleaned up in 2020.
Do you remember one of the great stories about Halloween ever in since we're talking politics before? And tell me if I got this wrong. Marjorie and I have talked about it a lot. Is Bill Weld at his house in West Cambridge?
Oh, yes.
Is having people in the sort of a classic fashion, an old Brahmin fashion, dunk for apples.
Dunk for apples in
you
the
go
foyer.
To his house,
the foyer.
In the foyer.
Yes. Foyer.
What?
He and his wife. His then wife.
Yeah, his then wife. You dunk for apples, sort of the classic thing. So apparently a reporter calls John Kerry, who is running against Bill Weld. This is 1994, right?
Was this a Senate? Was the Senate race?
Because who was giving out candy at the Kerry's house?
Who was that?
The uniformed maid.
Maid, that's right.
Oh, no. So Bill Weld was there in person.
Louisburg Square.
Louisburg Square, that's right.
With the fancy house?
So apparently John Kerry ran home, as the story goes. Is that what it was?
I think both.
So that he could stand
and his wife
at the door.
raced home.
No.
So they were.
That's brilliant. I got to read that clip
They
from
could be
1994.
giving out.
Wow, 1994. So many good memories.
And you know what they gave out that was really beautiful? They gave out DVDs of his great Senate speeches on the floor of the Senate. The kids loved them. It was really unbelievable.
Yeah, that was one of the great stories. Of course, Kerry went on to beat Bill Weld quite handily in the elections.
By the way, they did 8 debates or something. I went to a debate
I remember them.
at Faneuil Hall, and I have to say, it is so rare in American politics when you have two grown-ups who were incredibly smart in a debate. There's no personal recrimination kind of things. It was brilliant. It was really two really impressive characters.
I did one of those debates, Jim.
You did? Oh, right. Explain what happened there.
Well, I was very nervous because unlike when I do a debate with Jim, when I've been preparing for 3 weeks and I had piles of paper this high, I was very disorganized, didn't really prepare, and I couldn't think of an opening question, so I just asked, Senator Kerry, why doesn't anyone like you?
That was her first question.
That's brilliant.
First question.
Brilliant.
It went over really well.
Brilliant.
He loved it.
Yeah.
Anyway, we are done. Shirley Young, thank you very much
Great
for
to
coming
see you,
in.
Shirley.
Happy Halloween.
As
And to you.
always, yes.
Oh, that's
Good
right,
luck with all
next
those
week.
candy bars. Okay, coming up. You may know our next guest from his season 11 run on RuPaul's Drag Race as Miss Congeniality, Nina West. Now he's Edna Turnblatt in Hairspray, which is playing locally. Andrew Levitt joins us next. He's here at the library, listening to 89.7 GBH, Boston Public Library, Boston Public Radio, rather. As I just said, we are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you and Bridgewater State University. Parents, families, and supporters play a critical role in helping students navigate the college search process. You can find resources to help guide your student at the BSU Family Hub, bridgew.edu/family. Ukrainian reporters have been documenting the war from its first moments. Watch as they trace a pattern of Russian atrocities and face the challenges of holding Russia accountable on an all-new Frontline tonight at 10 on GBH2.
Trusted, local news. This is 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Ahead on Boston Public Radio, just after 12, we'll be joined live at the Boston Public Library by Andrew Levitt, a.k.a. Nina West, from Season 11 of RuPaul's Drag Race. We'll talk about Nina's new kids' book and what it was like stepping in the shoes of the great Divine to play Edna Turnblatt in the touring company of Hairspray, now at Citizens Bank Opera House.
Our food man Corby Kummer on the Barilla pasta consumers who banded together and sued the company after learning that Italy's #1 brand of pasta is made not in Italy, but in Iowa. Then journalist Anand Girdadas will zoom in to talk about his new book, The Persuaders, about what it takes to change a mind. Plus, CNN's John King with the latest from Washington. It's all ahead on Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Louise Schiavone. With the winter months approaching, the White House is encouraging Americans to get up to date on their COVID-19 shots. NPR's Giles Snyder reports President Biden is set to get his latest booster today.
The booster President Biden is getting is the new bivalent shot, formulated to target the original coronavirus strain, as well as the BA4 and BA5 Omicron subvariants, which are currently circulating. The new booster has been available for weeks. It was authorized in late August. Biden is just now getting his because he tested positive in July and then came down with a rebound case. Experts recommend waiting 90 days following an infection. Before rolling up his sleeve, the president is expected to deliver remarks on vaccines and the pandemic as the White House warns of the potential for another winter surge in infections. Giles Snyder, NPR News.
Britain's new Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has pledged to fix what he called the country's profound economic crisis. NPR's Frank Langfitt reports Sunak addressed the nation after officially taking office.
Sunak said addressing the huge hole in the government budget would require tough decisions on taxes and spending. Bronwyn Maddox, who runs the London think tank Chatham House, said the mistakes of the previous administration, which tanked the value of the pound, would make that politically easier.
He now has more support for saying we have to be really very conservative. We have to explain where money is coming from that we're going to spend, and that is going to mean some tax rises in some cases and paring back spending in others. And it's a really difficult moment.
Sunak is Britain's third prime minister in less than 2 months. Frank Langfitt, NPR News, London.
In Russian court proceedings today, WNBA star Brittney Griner lost her appeal of a 9-year prison sentence for drug possession. Speaking via a video link during her court proceeding, Griner apologized for the infraction, said she hoped her guilty plea would facilitate a more favorable result, and noted that other offenses far more serious than hers drew far less severe punishment. A White House official called the proceeding a sham. Ash Carter, defense secretary to former President Obama, has died suddenly at the age of 68. His family says the cause was a cardiac event. Carter was at the helm when the Pentagon announced that women would have access to all U.S. military combat positions. He spoke here in December of 2015 with NPR's Tom Bowman.
They'll be allowed to drive tanks, fire mortars, and lead infantry soldiers into combat. They'll be able to serve as Army Rangers and Green Berets, Navy SEALs, Marine Corps Infantry, Air Force parajumpers, and everything else that was previously open only to men.
Carter later headed the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs at Harvard. The Dow up 259. This is NPR.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro in Brookline. Some Massachusetts state employees who were fired after refusing to be vaccinated against COVID-19 under Governor Charlie Baker's executive order last year are now being offered their jobs back. In two separate letters shared with Mass Live, former MassDOT employees who were fired because of the mandate were offered their jobs back with duties and responsibilities the same as when they left. The letters, dated October 18th, also stated that acceptance of the offer to go back to work was unconditional. The rehire offer is in effect only until the end of this month. The Cambridge City Council has eliminated all minimum parking space requirements for the city's zoning code. The move, voted on yesterday, cites declining car ownership and the need for more open space and housing within the city. Cambridge City Councilor Burhan Azim is the chair of the city's Transportation and Public Utilities Committee. He tells GBH News that cars are slowly disappearing from Cambridge.
Support for NP.
A third of Cambridge residents don't own a car, and so you're building parking spots which can be very expensive, $50,000 to $150,000, but then end up not getting used.
The council voted 8-1 to amend the zoning ordinance that makes Cambridge the first Massachusetts city to fully abolish parking minimums. Previously, zoning regulations required that new residential developments to have at least one off-street parking space per unit. 64 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fidelity. With Fidelity Income Planning, Fidelity looks at how much clients saved, how much they'll need, and helps them build a plan for cash flow so they can go from saving to living. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC.
Hey, Mr. Rowdy, I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and every Friday from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming at YouTube. Oh, that's very nice. One person, I think, applauded.
That's really kind of you. Can the rest of you leave if you don't mind? Thank you.
Okay. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
And we should also remind people that Thursday from 12:30 to 1:30, Governor Baker, his final pre-election appearance, will be with us for an hour to take our questions and yours. And at 11:06, the woman leading in the polls for governor, that would be Maura Healey, will join us. And by the way, before you get upset, the Republican nominee, Jeff Deal, was with us.
Yes, he was.
Several weeks ago. Our next guest had big shoes to fill when stepping into the role of Edna Turnblad in Hairspray at the Citizens Bank Opera House. Andrew Levitt joins us now at the Boston Public Library. You may know him not just as the agoraphobic mother figure from the musical, but as competitor Nina West on season 11 of RuPaul's Drag Race, and as of today, he is officially an author. We'll talk about that too. Andrew Levitt, it's great to have you here.
It's so great to be here.
Thank you
so much for having me. Thank you.
So congratulations for your role in Hairspray.
Thank you.
Tell people, for the few people who haven't seen it, tell us what Hairspray is about.
Yeah, Hairspray is this wonderful, joyous musical that's set in 1962. I think at a time period when the country is on the verge of discovery and a loss of innocence, really. And we celebrate 1962, and we look at this year with Tracy Turnblad wanting to be a revolutionary and shake things up and get on the Courtney Collins show. And as a big girl, she doesn't think she's going to have the opportunity to do it. But then we discover much more about Baltimore in '62, and we talk about race, and we talk about the importance of integration and how that conversation really does spark a revolution.
You know, and obviously it's written by the great, is the word Baltimorean, is that a word?
I don't know.
John
Baltimorean.
Waters. I don't think in John's case. The brilliant John, and speaking of that, his buddy Divine, when you step into a role, I mean, not only is this a big deal if nobody like Divine or Harvey Firestein had done this before, when you do something that has been done in such legendary fashion by huge figures like that, how daunting is that?
I mean, it's terrifying. You look at the history of this role, and Divine, who this was his last great piece on film before he passed away, and this was Harvey's Tony Award-winning turn. We know Harvey from Torch Song Trilogy and from La Cage aux Folles, and so here he has this Tony Award-winning turn as Tracy's mom, and you go, oh, okay, it's just these two giant icons, and you just have to step into the shoes. So subtle. So it's of course,
so when
no
you read
pressure
a
at
Globe
all.
review and they praised a lot of your colleagues, they said I'm sure you'll deflect this, but they did say you're the star of the show. How's that feel? I mean, seriously, how's that feel? I mean,
let's just talk about it for a 20-minute show. No.
Absolutely.
I mean, how great is that?
I mean, I've been on the road with the show for the last year. I was terrified to do this show because it is such a departure of what I'm used to. You know, I was on season 11 of RuPaul's Drag Race, and I was touring around the country doing drag in my very own specific way, in my own niche. And to have this opportunity come to me through Jerry Mitchell, who was the original choreographer, and through Jack O'Brien, the original director, and then through John Waters is humbling. And so I never planned for it, and it wasn't part of my trajectory and my thought.
Have you met John, by the way?
I did. I met him in Provincetown.
What's it? Well, I've said before on the show, not only has he been on our show, but every time I'm in Provincetown and he rides down the street with his bike, I'm deciding, am I too intimidated to wave high for fear he won't remember it? He is just, we have a little sound from Welcome to the 60s. This is from the 2022 tour of Hairspray. I think you're in Ohio, your home state, doing this, I'm not sure, with Andrew Levitt, this person, playing Edna Turnblad and Nikki Metcalf as Tracy Turnblad. Here's a little piece of it. You're somewhere in there anyway.
I am in there. I swear I'm singing on that. I swear I'm a part of it.
Yeah, it's a big chorus, right? You know, let's talk a little bit about RuPaul's Drag Race, too.
Yeah.
You just said you were on season 11, and I didn't know until today when I was reading about you that you have tried out 9 times. I'm glad you made it there.
I am too. I am persistent, if anything.
But let's play a little sound from it, and then I wanted to ask you about it. This is Andrew on season 11, which he opens up about being Whoops, was somebody telling me that's the wrong thing? We don't have that sound. Okay, forget that. Then we're not going to.
Sort of like the phone line.
We'll pretend about it.
But tell me, you talked about how you think RuPaul's Drag Race show, which many millions of people watched, was a real game changer. What were you talking about?
Yeah, I think Drag Race has thrust the art of drag, which was a subcultural art form, into, I think, the popular ether and pop culture and how we consume drag to this day, right? So drag used to be, I mean, for many of us, was relegated to nightlife and bars and nightclubs. And Drag Race and RuPaul and World of Wonder, the producers behind that show, completely knocked all of that down and opened up this floodgate, I think, of this very new, very fresh, very subculturally driven community art form, you know. And so drag now it's everywhere. I mean, as in Hocus Pocus 2, there are drag queens in Hocus Pocus 2, the new Disney Plus film, you know, which says a lot from how far we've gone. But that was also only possible because, reflecting back to Divine and the work that Divine did, sure, some of it was super subversive, you know, when you talk about Pink Flamingos, but the legacy that you leave and that builds to now where we have queens in Hocus Pocus 2. You know, there's the conversation surrounding drag and its vitality and its vibrancy towards art and pop culture is tremendous, and its impact is huge.
We do have the sound now. You want to try it again?
Well, whatever you like, Marjorie.
Okay. This is Andrew on 11, I should say, on season 11, RuPaul's Drag Race, and he's opening up about being targeted in college while running for student government around the time of Matthew Shepard's murder.
This underground hate group that was on our really small conservative college campus took it upon themselves to harass me, to break into my dorm room, to like threaten my life and say they were gonna kill me. What the I came home and then there was carved in my door. There was papers shoved underneath my door threatening me. The next night, there was a voice distortion message on my phone that said, "You dirty we're coming to kill you." One of my students came and knocked on the door and said, "Someone's trying to break into the building." And I picked up the phone, and it was that distorted voice saying, we're getting inside, we're gonna get you.
Okay, I mean, that is horrible and terribly upsetting. This was when you were what, 20 years old?
Yeah, this was 1998, 99. Matthew Shepard had just been murdered. He was a college student who had been murdered. And this was maybe 6 months after that, 7 months after that. And of course it was I think maybe that, first of all, he never intended to share that on television. Like it was, some things, especially at this point in Drag Race, season 11, queens can go and kind of really self-produce almost, and kind of share what they're willing to share whenever they're willing to share it. And the conversation in the workroom that day had been surrounding bullying and the topic of like hate and how it was directed at the LGBTQIA+ community. And I just found myself in a really raw, unfiltered moment, and I just started to share that. And I'd never shared it with anybody but maybe 4 people back home, and my parents obviously knew about it. And yeah, it's painful, and it's also, I mean, that was in a very different era of conversation surrounding equality and equal rights.
Well, to a point. I mean, I would agree. Clearly progress has been made. The first person I ever introduced this to Drag Queen Story Hour was Ryan Landry, who did it on the Cape and was talking to us about his experience, which was all positive. And then about a year after Ryan was on,
That's where I saw it, Provincetown, the first time ever.
Yeah, I can't remember, Truro, Providence, wherever it was. And then the thing that happened in JP, what was it? You may not have been in town for this, but we had the person on who was doing Drag Queen Story Hour there. And I don't know what they were, is like white supremacists or neo-Nazis or picketing outside. And while they may be aberrational in terms of the grand scheme, it's still really scary.
Well, I mean, I have to say, the culture has evolved in so many ways. We've had marriage equality. We've had all of these wonderful, I think, points that we can point to. But, even in my own experience, I was doing Drag Queen Story Hour over the pandemic virtually. And I was doing it live on my Instagram feed. And somehow it had caught the attention of some right-wing activists. And then at that point I had been doxxed, and then people started showing up at my house, and then people were putting signs in my yard. People were blowing air horns in my windows while I was recording these things live for families. And then, which caused me to have to move out of my house during the pandemic. This was so like everyone knew where I was until I had to move out of my house for several months to address the issue, to work with the Columbus Police Department to address these things that were terrifying and scary. And, I would love to say that we live in a different world, in a different culture, but we don't. And that's why voices like mine and other drag artists do matter, because we're just really ultimately striving for equity and equality, specifically also for our families and their kids. We too have families, we too have children, we too want to protect them and give them the best access.
Speaking of kids, I'm assuming, and probably shouldn't, that everybody knows what Drag Queen Story Hour is.
Yeah.
Can you describe what it is and why it's as important and as successful as it appears to be?
Imagine going to a public library as wonderful as the Boston Public Library or any wonderful institution that allows the free exchange of thought, and you have a fabulous, wonderful entertainer coming in to share a book about sharing or kindness or generosity or what my family might look like versus what your family might look like, and how wonderful that tapestry and rich that is. And the message is coming from a really bright, colorful character that is oftentimes referred to as a clown, right? You know, we are these lovely, wonderful, vibrant creatures who share joy through our art form and through our energy. And that brings kids in to feel comfortable and have the ability to ask questions. And those questions are, oh my gosh, why is your hair pink today? Or why did you choose to, wow, your outfit has fish on it. What's your favorite fish? I mean, but it makes, there's an immediate unifier in the silliness and the vivid creation of what drag represents. And drag is a celebration of self. It's an explosion of self-celebration. And I think that that's what's really powerful for kids to see. It's, and there's nothing else to it.
Yeah.
So speaking of kids, you are bearing something with you today,
Yeah.
which
Yes.
I believe
Yes.
is just published today. Is
It
that
was
right?
published today, yeah. And this is for
Congratulations.
this is for you guys. This is for
thank
you
you
guys.
very much.
But
Tell
this-
us about it.
Yeah, this is like 3 years in the process. So I worked with Princeton Architectural Press 3 years ago. I released a children's music EP called Drag is Magic, and on that EP I celebrate a variety of different things that I think are just incredible and fun that drag bring to life. And a book agent heard that EP and they said, oh my gosh, you should turn this into a book. And I was like, well, I mean, how about a new idea? So 3 years later, today is actually the publishing day for the You Kind of Kind. It's a book about finding kindness in the world and celebrating your authentic self, and also celebrating what kindness looks like. From everything to saying hello to somebody. Oftentimes we exist in a world where we're down and we're looking at our phones and we're not looking up at people and we're not acknowledging their existence. So saying hello to someone else and allowing them to feel and be seen, to sharing your heart and your ear to listen to someone, or even just opening a door, of how you can give kindness in the world and how your own kindness is a wonderful expression of yourself.
You can't be this good a person. I mean, come on. Tell us, Andrew Levitt. This is BS.
No, I wish I would. Tell you what.
Tell us something horrible you've done in the last month.
I know. He buys from Amazon. Like all of us that are trying to be better and not buy from Amazon. Maybe once or twice.
Maybe once or twice I've shopped at the Amazon. Maybe once or twice.
Okay.
Once or twice.
Yeah, I did too. But you distinguish between kindness and being nice. What do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, so often in our culture, the conversation surrounding kindness is almost seen as being soft or being weak. And I think it takes an immense amount of bravery and tenacity and fortitude to show up in front of someone who might be wanting to confront you in a very aggressive way, and provide kindness, provide grace. And what does that look like? It looks like something different for all of us. But how I extend myself and I engage myself in the world with another person who may have a problem with who I am intrinsically at my core, it is very important and very powerful. And I'm here to try to disarm someone and engage in a conversation rather than yelling in the ether of proving why my point is right and yours is wrong, which is we've done now for the last 9 years really heavily throughout our media in this country. And I think we all can hopefully agree that that's really not getting us any further in, I think, making ourselves comfortable in this world.
So we're speaking with Andrew Levitt, who's inhabiting the role of Edna Turnblad in Hairspray. It's at Broadway in Boston through the end of the month, October 30th, I should say. So how did you get to that place, the kindness place? And how did you, is this some philosophy you embraced, or is this something your mother taught you, or what's this? Where'd this come from?
Well, I grew up in a really conservative household. I grew up with very conservative parents.
In Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah, Northeast Ohio was where I grew up, in Canton, Ohio. And so, but I moved to Columbus.
C,
yeah,
right.
I know, all
Columbus,
C's in Ohio.
Canton, Cincinnati,
Chillicothe. I mean, there's a lot of C towns in Ohio. But I grew up in Northeast Ohio, and I grew up in a very conservative family. I remember going to political fundraisers. My grandfather was involved in a lot of Republican politics, and in turn, my father is and was as I was growing up. And I even attended the 1992 Republican National Convention, which was, interestingly enough, at 12 years old, the first time I ever got drunk was by a bunch of right-to-lifers who served me sangria at a Mexican restaurant in Houston, Texas. So there's that story. So I mean, a 12-year-old. Anyway, so in my growing up, I think I was instilled with a lot of intention to be involved civically in my community and give back. But the clip that you played and the story that happened to me at Denison University, which is in Granville, Ohio, that I think changed my whole life and how I never wanted to feel alone, and then turn through a lot of therapy and a lot of work. I also identified that I think it has become my life's work to ensure that LGBTQIA plus people, queer people, don't feel alone or isolated. And I think so oftentimes that's how the other side wants us to feel, that we don't have anywhere to turn, we don't have anywhere to look, we don't have any hope of finding our own choice in happiness, in family, in spouse, in job. I mean, these are like basic things that some people really take for granted. And, you know, I just want the freedom to be able to work in a place and to not have the threat of being fired for who I am. And you know, that is something that resonates with almost every LGBTQIA plus person.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Margaret.
Do you find differences in different parts of the country? I mean, we're here in Boston.
Oh, yeah.
You know, first state that did gay marriage. We think of ourselves as quite liberal. That's right.
Yeah, the first. I'm in Massachusetts.
Exactly.
It's the first.
But we also had this incident with these nasty people with their masks on, scaring families over the library in Jamaica Plain. But is it different here, or are we just fooling ourselves?
I mean, it's. You're not fooling yourself. This is a state comprised primarily of people who actually want other people in the state to have access to a healthy and happy life. That has nothing to do, nor does it impact their own life and they're achieving their own happiness. I think what's happening across the country, the conversation that's occurring, is that we are finding ourselves, again, as I said, there are people who want us to feel isolated. There are people who want us to feel alone, or to point out that we are the big bad, when in turn, they're masking all of these other issues that really are tearing us apart as a community and as a country. And I think that, you know, as someone who stands firmly in what I believe, you know, I'm here to do what I'm here to do, and I'm here to celebrate LGBTQIA plus families and their children and allow them to feel safe and comfortable and secure. And if that means I'm going to be doing a drag queen story hour to help them feel like there's some sense of kind of content they want to give to their family and they want to give to their children, then I will do that. If that means I will go vote, I will do that. And in turn, encourage people who are engaging with me to access and exercise those very same things.
Okay, so speaking of voting, and speaking of Ohio, and speaking of people who don't want you to have a happy and healthy life, so this morning, independent of you coming, because I forgot you were from Ohio, I was looking at the most recent Senate polling, and the insufferable, toxic J.D. Vance continues to maintain a 2 or 3 point lead over Representative Congressman Ryan, who obviously is the Democratic nominee for an open Senate seat. Are people voting for J.D. Vance? J.D. Vance, as was pointed out, I mentioned you in the last debate between the two of them, Ryan says, used to think Trump was a Nazi, and now he's the greatest president. Another candidate who did a total flip to get. Is this all about Trump? Is Vance's appeal all about Trump's appeal to a segment of your fellow Ohioans? Why is this race trending to the Republican? When Ryan seems to me, if there was one Democrat in the country who totally gets this whole angst that a lot of Democrats find them and independents
Tim
find
Ryan's great.
Tim Ryan really gets it. So why is Vance doing as well as he's doing there?
Well, I think it's unfortunate to say that Ohio historically was a bellwether state. It would swing in either direction. I don't think it is any longer. And I think the problem is that now Ohio, as someone who is a progressive, it pains me to say that I think Ohio is now a red state. Yeah. And I think that there's a tremendous amount of work that has to be done. You know, in cities like Cleveland, that is a union town. and used to be really strongly rooted in the Democratic Party. I mean, but there's a conversation also that I think needs to occur about the politics of what Democrats want, and I think that there are many people in Ohio who feel disenfranchised and feel that J.D. Vance is somehow speaking to their cause and to their need, and I can't speak to why they would feel aligned with him.
Is your father alive?
Yes, he is.
Is he voting for Vance?
I believe so.
Oh my goodness.
For that reason?
We have this interesting relationship in my family where we
don't talk about politics.
I think for us to function in a healthy way, they know where I stand. We have as much of a civil conversation as we possibly can before we have to stop talking about it.
Yeah.
Because, for me to have a relationship with my parents, which is really important to me, I have to learn how to negotiate those things. And that's painful, because I believe my parents see me for who I am, and I believe that they love me for who I am, and I also am challenged by their beliefs and justification for supporting people who do not see me as a full human being.
So I want to know before you go, how long does it take you to get dressed up? As Edna Turnblad.
That's the most thrilling question of the day.
Or Nina Way. Yeah, how long does it take?
So Edna is a very fast transformation. She's about 20 minutes.
Oh, that's not bad.
Because
that's not bad.
She's growing throughout the show. The great thing about Edna and Hairspray is that she really is this character that gets to experience a full transformation. We see her at her worst, her lowest, at the very top of the show, where she has put no investment in time into herself. She doesn't care about herself. In fact, she loathes herself and what she's become. And then by the time we get to the end of the show, she's fully realized. She's fully celebrating this gorgeous creature that she actually really is, thanks to the work of her child and her incredible husband. So that work I build throughout the show. And so there's a story told through the text, through song, and through how I present her makeup and how I tell her story.
Okay.
And then Nina West is about
longer?
2 hours.
2 hours. Is it 2 hours?
She's a little bit.
Wow.
She's a little bit more needy.
Yeah. And how about when you're de-Nina-izing? Is that 2 hours?
5 minutes.
Okay.
It literally is in and out. It's so fast. Yeah.
Okay.
So the book out today
Book
is
is
The
out
You
today.
Kind of Kind. Marjorie and I read it this morning, and it's fabulous.
Yeah.
The You Kind of Kind.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And you're at the
Thank you.
Citizens Bank Opera House through October 30th. If people want
We got to get there before this. We got to get there.
I think Hairspray is the perfect remedy right now for a lot of things. We're not going to solve anything in this country without having a conversation. I think Hairspray is this great explosion of joy that I think helps promote simple conversation.
It's great to meet you, by the way.
Thank you very much for coming in. We very
Thanks for
appreciate
having me.
And
Andrew Levitt,
congratulations on
Thank
a
you.
great career.
Thank you.
And I hope things go okay at Thanksgiving if you're going home.
I'm
Okay.
bringing the sweet potatoes. It'll be great.
All right. We've been speaking with Andrew Levitt, who's inhabiting the role of Edna Turnblad in Hairspray. As I said, it is presented by Broadway in Boston at the Citizens Bank Opera House, and it's going to be there through October 30th. And I think you should get down there and see Andrew in action. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks so much.
Coming up, apparently Italy's favorite pasta is made in Iowa. Food policy analyst Corby Kummer is here to explain why that's Scaparilla in hot water. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and every Friday from the Boston Public Library.
Local politics, trusted local reporters.
Oh my gosh, when it's election season, I am gaining weight.
City Hall reporter Soraya Wintersmith.
I'm gaining weight because I'm eating bad, because I'm working so hard to understand every little development that might impact the vote that you do when you go into the booth. In the lead up to Election Day, there can be several developments within 24 hours.
The GBH News Politics Team.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Guava Health, a personal health tracker that keeps your health information in one place. You can find records, see health trends, and track your symptoms and meds. available on Android, iOS, and guavahealth.com. And the University of New England, offering undergraduate master's and doctorate programs on campuses in coastal Biddeford and Portland, Maine, Tangier, Morocco, and online. The University of New England, une.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined now on Zoom by Corby Kummer. Corby is Executive Director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, Senior Editor at The Atlantic, and Senior Lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Hello there, Corby Kummer.
You are getting so fast at that, Jim Browdy.
Trying to get it out of the way so we can get to the meat of the matter. So nice to see you, Corby.
So Corby, come on. Yeah, great to see you as always. So let's start with this story. It's out of New York, but it's about car-free streets because restaurants have moved out into those streets, and it's working, I think, there, and maybe we're thinking it might work elsewhere. Continuing on the tradition that we began, not the tradition, but the practice that we had during the pandemic.
This is fantastic news. So it's a new economic report that New York City has done about the business restaurants did before and after the Open Streets program. So this is a question of not only allowing outdoor seating, but closing the streets to traffic. So certain blocks in New York City were closed off to traffic during the pandemic. And so restaurants could go right into the street, not just on the sidewalks or in those booths that sort of project a little bit out from the sidewalks, but certain blocks, Vanderbilt Ave, Brooklyn, where I just was, it's been a huge success. The West 21st Street in Chelsea, New York, and Gramercy Park, it's been unbelievably successful, as in the business goes up. They had more business post-pandemic than before pandemic, and they had more business than streets that did not close themselves to motor vehicle traffic.
You know, you mentioned Vanderbilt Avenue, and I happened to be over the summer. I don't know if they do it continuing into the fall, but they had different dancing on Saturday nights. One week they had the salsa dancing, and then they had like hip hop, and then they had, you know, I don't know, ballroom dancing, whatever they had, on this great big wide avenue. So you have this vast expanse for restaurants, plus this vast expanse for hundreds and hundreds of people dancing out in the middle of a summer night.
Incredibly festive. Yeah, we were visiting my stepdaughter just 2 weeks ago, and we saw the same scene that you're describing.
Yeah.
And remember that when the Greenway was being planned and built, the Boston planner said, we've gone to Las Ramblas in Barcelona. We're looking for the most successful outdoor urban spaces. Inadvertently, the pandemic, through this experimental program, has created that kind of urban inner city paradise that we've always wanted, of no vehicles, lots of open restaurants and food stands and businesses, and it's just this kind of pedestrian paradise that we've always hoped for.
You know, by the way, Mayor Wu, we've spoken to Mayor Wu the last couple of months about exactly this thing, and she's trying to envision what, during these shutdowns of places like Newbury Street and a lot of streets out in communities, not to mention Copley Place, that was shut down, I think during the 30-day Orange Line shutdown, if I remember correctly, should be continued into the future. And I hope this New York City experiment or study is a guide, because I understand some neighborhood residents, like in the North End, are not crazy about these kinds of closures or outdoor restaurants. Like it's nothing but good and communal, and I think good for business. So I'm thrilled actually to see what happened in New York City. We're talking to Corby Kummer.
Well, Corby Kummer, here's another neat idea. I'm dying to know what you think about it. Local restaurants doing this reducing food waste program, and what they've done, one of them is over right next to us actually, at the Fairmont Copley Plaza Hotel, the Oak Long Bar and Kitchen. So they make all the food there, they serve the food there to their customers, and at the end of breakfast and dinner, they bring out these so-called surprise bags and sell all this food.
I just love this. So there have been lots of different kinds of software. For example, a matchup service that isn't Tinder or Hinge, but it's who has leftovers, and you meet on the street and you exchange leftovers. This is taking it a step farther. So the Oak Bar and Kitchen, right across the street from the BPL in Copley Place, Copley Plaza, is offering for $6.99 surprise leftover bags at the end of service. So you sign up on an app because it's a pilot program. There's only 3 to 6 bags after the breakfast service when you get lots of croissant or leftover pastry, or after lunch or dinner, and you get a lot of food. Oak Bar says it's at 1/3 the price it would otherwise cost. If you sign up for the app, you show up afterward as if it's a takeout service, and you get your bag of a lot of food, and you open it up, and you have a lot of food for cheap. It's available a few hours ahead. It's called Too Good to Go. So this is an inventive new app. I wonder about the creators. I hope that it's adopted by a lot of other cities. But it's not only Oak Bar and restaurant. It's a bunch of other local restaurants. Oh, it was based in Denmark, and it's been adapted in Boston. And Cava, Italy, Boston, Maggiano's Little Italy, Finagle a Bagel. And according to a local spokesperson, over 100,000 meals have already been saved from food waste in Boston.
100,000. That's
Well,
a lot.
and by the way, it matters for a couple of reasons, one of which I assume is obvious, but I don't know if people know the numbers. We learned this number from you. I think it's, 30 to 40% of food that is made in restaurants is waste and is thrown out, except for those that donate to homeless shelters or have programs like that. Am I right in terms of the number, or am I not?
Well, there's constant controversy. It's not just restaurants, it's supermarkets that throw it out, and people who buy lettuce and all this sort of produce that rots in their fridge. It's 30 to 40%.
And there's another really good reason you didn't mention, I assume, that you get new customers. I mean, people who can't, or originally might say, I'm not going to go to that place because it's a little pricey, as the Oak Bar is. You find out the food is great at a totally affordable price, and you may get, 1 out of 3, 1 out of 10 people who experience it go to the restaurant.
There was such a good quote from a Northeastern student, Omar in the Boston Globe piece. It's really good. I like the concept. Great food most of the time. Environmentally friendly, supporting the earth and all of that, ... Also, it's cheap.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when the college kids are going to get it for $6.99, then when mom and dad come to town for the college weekend, they can hook them up for a real big dinner, sit down at the Oak Bar, which has been there forever. I mean, that's such a great traditional.
What's the name of the app
place.
again? Could you have it in front of you? I don't know.
Too Good to Go.
Yeah, Too Good to Go.
Too Good to Go.
Too
That's
Good
terrific.
to Go. Yes, you can get it there.
You know, speaking of Too Good to Go, this is too good to like. I have to say, it is, whoever is the first person who have said, it is better you not know about the private lives of people whose public lives you respect. I'm a huge James Corden fan. I think he is wildly talented, but even more, he appears, this shows how you shouldn't make these judgments, he appears to be such a warm, accessible person. And there is this story about how he treated servers in some elite restaurant, which I'm sure you've been to in New York City. Explain.
Well, of course I have.
Of course you have, exactly. Tell us about what Corden did with his wife at this particular restaurant, Corby Kummer.
So it's Balthazar in Soho in New York, a wonderful bistro with red leather banquettes that makes you feel like you're in Paris, but it became a very in spot. And at brunch, he found a hair in his main course, and he complained right away. And then much worse, his wife ordered apparently an egg yolk omelet. Who has egg yolk omelets?
I've never even heard of it before.
Did I? I thought you had egg white omelets.
Oh, weird. Of course, that little strand of egg white in it, and said, how dare you do this? You have to make it right this second, and then give us some rounds of free drinks right now. And Keith McNally, the sort of barkeeper, saloon master of Balthazar and many other successful New York restaurants, posted on Instagram and said, James Corden is banned from our restaurants because this is by far not the first time. There have been many managers' reports. There was a paper trail against James Corden. And McNally, the restaurateur, put it all on social media. The whole thing was played out on social media. And then James Corden apologized, but not really. It just makes everybody look bad. Keith McNally, as soon as Corden posted his apology, said, okay, you can come back, and the drinks are on me, which was like not the best way to do it. The lessons are, you should say something to the restaurant if something went wrong, but say it nicely, give them a chance to make it better, and don't complain too much if they don't do it instantly. This kind of treating servers like servants is exactly the wrong thing to do. And if you're on a first date, for example, your date will rightly say, if this person treats the help like this, I don't want anything to do with him or her.
That's right.
I want
That's right.
I want to
Good
finish
point.
that story, though, because we are huge believers in heartfelt apologies on this show. This was not a heartfelt apology by Mr. Corden. He apologizes to this McNally guy, who then says what you said, free drinks or whatever it is. And then he goes to the New York Times, James Corden, and says he had nothing to apologize for. So the bottom line is, it wasn't an apology. And
it was the worst interview. It was with the Times that had been arranged a month in advance. He didn't cancel, and he kept saying, this is too silly to talk about. It's beneath me to address.
By the way, I know we've told this story many times. We have many new listeners. It's got to be told again. This story was written by your buddy, Tom,
Sitzema.
Okay, so Marjorie and I and our whole team are in Washington during Trump's inauguration. Don't hold it against us. We went down for inaugural week. And we're broadcasting from NPR. And Tom Sitzema, who's the lead restaurant critic for and food writer for the Washington Post, agrees to come on, not because he has any idea who we are, but because he's a buddy of Corby's and Corby asked him to do it. He comes on. He was beyond delightful, really entertaining. And as he's leaving, our colleague, Amanda, at that point, who's no longer with us, she's doing other stuff, takes his photograph. And he says, nice to meet you. By the way, what are you doing with the photograph? And she says, I'm about to post it online, as we're doing with all our guests, not knowing that this is one of these restaurant critics who, other than his friends, no one knows what he looks like.
That's right.
So he can judge a restaurant in anonymity. And luckily, we killed the photo before we posted it and killed his career. He's a wonderful guy, and it's a wonderful piece. And I'm not watching James Corden anymore. We're talking to Corby Kummer.
So Corby Kummer, I read this morning about Restoration Hardware, a high-end, beautiful furniture store, lots of beige, lots of very...
Lots of beige.
very beige, very coastal, the coastal grandmother kind of thing, Jim, off-whites and beiges and all that. They're now serving food in some of their restaurants. I'm not sure if
some of their furniture stores.
Some of the furniture stores, sorry. They're serving food in some of their furniture stores, which seems unusual, but maybe it's a great way to sell more furniture. I don't know.
So they're positioning themselves as a luxury brand in all ways. There's a guy who was the head of Williams-Sonoma. It was founded by, I didn't know this, an ex-social worker who would find like neat little pieces of antique hardware, and he would sell them. So it was sort of a goodsy-woodsy, post-hippie, if not Eureka, California, a Northern California store. But then it became this sort of luxury car, luxury everything ethos. They're doing tours, they're doing luxury everything. But here's what I like. Not only is it beautiful, but apparently there's a sense of humor, because the greeter to a New York restaurant greeted the Times reporter Priya Krishna by saying, "Welcome to our very beige space," which is sort of making fun of themselves. And the head of it, who's named Gary Friedman, said, nobody cares if the room's beautiful if the food sucks. Okay, good. And they don't make a celebrity chef thing, although he said that he consulted arguably the best chef in the world, whom he won't name, probably because of some non-disclosure agreement, before he did it. But I'm staying right now with a friend who might be the most expert food person I know, and she dined at a Napa Restoration Hardware restaurant. They're now called RH. They're formerly known as
RH, that's right,
Hardware.
that's right.
And she raved about the sole in a beurre blanc and the decadent homemade, was it scones with strawberry jam for dessert?
Oh, I love scones with strawberry jam.
Salad, because it was in Napa. In other words, if she's saying the food is good, that means it's really good. And so the idea that you can go, I'm sure, Marjorie, it is indeed going to increase their furniture sales. And right now, when you think of it, bricks and mortar stores have to find new ways and new identities to keep people coming in, because everybody buys everything online.
Let me tell you, if there's anything I'd like to do is go spend $50 for an appetizer to eat in a hardware store. I don't know about you.
But hold on for a second. Not exactly like RH or Restoration Hardware, where the hamburgers, I think, are $38, is what I read in that story.
My point, yeah.
IKEA does this, right? How many people go to
Like
IKEA?
Swedish meatballs and hot dogs.
And they're there
meatballs.
for hours to eat all the food that's much less pricey. At IKEA, the furniture is much less pricey too, but you make it a day of it. You lug the kids down there, and everybody hangs around and little play space.
First time I went to IKEA, and where is it?
It's one in Stoughton.
Stoughton.
Yes.
The first time I went there, it was solely to try the Swedish meatballs.
There you go.
It was not to buy any
What about the
furniture.
lingonberry jam?
That's right.
Missed out on
That's
that,
right.
I
I mean,
should
it's not an unusual pitch, I think.
Can I tell you, I will go to another state for a Swedish meatball, especially if it's cheap.
All right.
So I'm going to play for you a commercial from, how do you pronounce Barilla? Is
Barilla.
Barilla how you say it?
Just the way you said it.
Okay,
Barilla.
Barilla, the pasta company. Here's an ad from the 1990s.
It's outrageous.
Which really leans into, as I would too, the company's Italian origin. Here it is.
In Italy, our number one pasta is Barilla. Why?
Sempre al dente.
No hard, no soft.
Perfetta.
Perfect.
No, gnam, gnam, gnam.
As you can see, all the pastas can be sticky.
Gruppati.
È pasta Barilla. È al dente. It's always firm yet tender.
Springi.
Capito? And now Barilla is imported to America.
The best of the pasta.
Barilla pasta, number one in Italy, al dente is why.
And by the way, I spent a little bit more for Barilla pasta because it's made in Italy. Why
Yeah.
wouldn't you do that?
Well, it's not actually. Is it, Corby?
It's made in Iowa.
Close enough.
Iowa.
There's now a lawsuit
Yeah.
by a California law firm and two consumers saying, well, you know, it may be $2 a box, but it says Italy's number one brand in big letters on the package and apparently in small letters made in the United States. But if it says Italy's number one brand, I assume it's made in Italy.
Exactly.
And somebody else, I think a defender of the company, says, listen, if it's $2 a box, what do you think? Use your head. It's not
That's their
made in
defense,
Italy.
right? Their defense
I
is...
do think that it is misleading, and that if it said something like proudly in the USA by Italy's leading pasta company, that would be something else.
Okay.
Wait a second, do people win these lawsuits? I mean, this is not the first of its kind where there's some alleged misrepresentation in terms of marketing a product. Does anyone ever win these lawsuits?
Yeah, they do win these lawsuits, and companies can bring them against each other.
Right.
For saying, that there's 100% fruit juice that isn't at all 100% fruit juice. That went to the Supreme Court.
It did?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How did they rule?
It was Wonderful Palm Company, and they won against Coca-Cola.
Well, you should say, in all fairness, they won, but Ginny Thomas dissented in the case, so it was not unanimous. Right. But go ahead.
Right.
He issued a stay.
Yes, that's right.
Target.
So Corby Kummer, this is very distressing. Just a few weeks before Thanksgiving, apparently turkeys are going to be hard to get this year, and if you get them, they're not going to be what you'd hoped you'd get, and they're going to cost you a fortune.
Okay, so that's distressing from the consumer point of view. The price is going to go up. Here's the take-home advice for everybody. If you see a turkey that's the right size right now, buy it and freeze it. It's probably going to get more expensive unless there are loss leader specials right before the holidays. But there are fewer turkeys now. During the pandemic, farmers stopped buying as many, hatching as many. But what's happening now is there's avian flu.
Avian flu.
6% of the U.S. turkey flock has been hit and been destroyed. Remember the swine flu where entire herds had to be destroyed and killed? It's happening right now with enormous turkey production plants. There's often as million confined in one production facility where they will do things like put in fire extinguisher foam to kill them.
Can we talk about that for 1 second? As troubling as the concept was to begin with, and I understand that if one bird gets avian flu in a confined facility, no matter how large it is, you got to kill them all. Is there not a more humane way? By the way, the other ways they killed these birds en masse was no more humane than the way you just described. I assume there's a more humane way to do this, is there not?
There might not be. The least humane thing is cutting off their air and turning up the heat so that they cook and suffocate. It happens now, and it happened before in mass killings. But there's a big human cost too. One of the things that the reporter Kim Severson was saying as she was writing this story is that a lot of the websites she was seeing from trade publications about the problems had a suicide hotline at the bottom, because farmer suicides, the idea of having to destroy your income for the year, not knowing if insurance is going to cover it, and just the human cost of having to remove these carcasses. They're generally composted, sometimes they're incinerated. It's horrible. And so avian flu is really bad, and people just haven't been noticing that it's been destroying a lot of big production facilities, which leads to the whole debate. Should these production facilities be allowed? Shouldn't they be broken up so that there's more pasture-raised poultry?
By the way, they're saying the price of the turkey is going to go up roughly 73%, which is pretty huge. Number one, $1.99 a pound, I think, for a frozen one or something. I have to say, this is rather embarrassing, but we try to be transparent here. One of the most successful segments we've ever done in our 4 years on radio, Corby, unfortunately, was on the old radio station every Thanksgiving. We would call Mrs. Butterball on the phone. Mrs. Butterball, apparently there are like 1,000 Mrs. Butterballs sitting somewhere in Minnesota or something.
Standing by.
And they answer all your questions. And this woman, was she unbelievable?
She was great.
We got a random Mrs. Butterball and she was terrific. And our ratings peaked during that particular segment. What's your reaction to that?
That's what put us over the top.
That everybody is anxious about homemade meals, especially ones that have certain strictures and rules that they're really worried about following. They don't make turkey the rest of the year, so it's natural that they need advice.
Now, before you go away, is the company, I confused the companies, the company where the CEO bit the guy on the nose, was that Beyond Meat or Impossible?
It was Beyond Meat.
Beyond Meat. Okay, so there's another Beyond Meat story where they are now coming out with steak tips. And what we've had before, correct me if I'm wrong, because I've had very few experiences with this plant-based meat variety kinds of things. Apparently, the terms that I learned overnight was most of what they produce so far is chop and form, which is one of the reasons that it's often replacing a burger or that sort of thing ground. This is whole muscle, where at least according to some honest critics, the texture is pretty close to duplicated. Have you tried it, and whether you have or not, you buying that?
Oh, I am buying it, and I can't wait to taste the steak tips. Here's why. I think it's 7 or more years ago, I did a big piece for MIT's Technology Review, months of research going out to investigate plant-based meat, and they could not get muscles. So they could get, ground meat. They made it much better. But that's extruding something kind of like pasta, the good pasta made in Italy we're talking about, comes through holes, and then they'll make it like chopped beef, and you put it in your taco or your enchilada. But what they were saying was maybe we're going to get chicken breast because it's got one texture, but steak never, because it has a variety of the way the fat's marbled in it. There's gristle. It sounds gross, but people expect chewiness. They need it in muscle cuts. So steak tips with big chunks of meat now have really succeeded in this whole muscle technology. It's taken years. Every company is developing them, different kinds of cuts. Steak tip was apparently easier than other kinds of steak, but 7 or 8 years ago, it was a dream remote in the future, if ever. And so the idea that Beyond Meat's the first off the mark, it's in Taco Bell. They're running national tests right now. They're in Giant and Stop and Shop, so you can go buy them. I think in the freezer case, food distributors. And Vox, which is kind of a harsh critic, they had some really positive reactions from the panel they put together of people who really couldn't tell the difference. So this is a giant leap forward. Beyond Meat's the first one on the market. Everybody's going to be marketing these, and I think it's great news.
Very quickly, if they're spreading their wings and theoretically doing whatever that expression I used a minute ago, whole muscle, which theoretically replicates the texture of meat, or at least pretty close, why is their business suffering?
Oh, because they are more expensive than regular meat alternatives. And they've announced recently, 2 weeks ago, at around the time when all you were thinking about was the guy with the nose, a vegan or not, They announced that by 2023, they were going to have price parity, meaning there wasn't going to be a premium for buying their ground meat. I think they're starting that in Walmart. So the idea is there's been a lot of consumer resistance and saying right now, if it's much more expensive than regular ground meat, forget it. I don't care about the environment. I don't care about health, which are the two big reasons, environment and no cholesterol for health. I'm not going to buy it. They are now, Beyond Meat, they've cut 19% of their work staff, they're cutting expenses, and they're cutting the price differential. So that should bring back the market, but that's been the big limiting step for consumers.
We should try the steak tips. I know you're hesitant to do it. Let's
I
try
am
it.
hesitant to do it.
We're going to try it. Corby, it's good to talk to you as always.
Corby Kummer, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with Corby Kummer, Executive Director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, a Senior Editor at The Atlantic, and a Senior Lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Up next, we get a cautiously optimistic look at the future of American democracy from Anand Giridhar, whose latest book is The Persuaders. It looks at the forces on the left trying to garner real political change, how to persuade. He's next on 89.7 GBH, Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
Writer Kelly Corrigan says there's a lie at the heart of the fear over college admissions.
The lie is that this is a binary moment, and that if you get to the University of Stretch Dream goal, everything will unfold accordingly.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly, surviving and growing through the madness of college applications this afternoon on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and National Grid, providing access to electric heat pumps that can help businesses achieve their sustainability goals. You can learn more about heat pump technology at ngrid.com/future. And Bunker Hill Community College, presenting the Compelling Conversations Speakers Series with Dr. Bernice King, minister, attorney, and daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on campus November 3rd. bhcc.edu/cc.
Trusted. Local. News. This is 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. The current governor will be with us 12:30 to 1:30 on Thursday, and the would-be governor, Maura Healey, will join us at 11:06 this Thursday as well. Over the past few years, our political discourse has hardened, to say the least. Journalist Anand Giridhar makes the case in his new book, The Persuaders, that our wholesale dismissal of the other side puts us on the road to things like civil war, political violence. It's easier to feel fatalistic about the future of American democracy when it feels like you can't find any common ground. Through interviews with political activists, organizers, and leaders on the left, he provides a window into the foot soldiers and leaders, as I said, trying to save American democracy by rejecting that fatalism and cynicism. It's far from a cry for centrism, as he'll explain. Anand, congratulations. Great to see you again.
Thank you so much for having me back.
Pleasure.
Okay, so I read your book and realized I'm one of the people that's doing everything wrong.
Same. I realized that writing it.
Okay, so tell us your premise, what we should be doing, those of us who are worried about the fall of democracy, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I think we, like you, and like a lot of people listening to this, the last many years have been a time of real worry and despair. and fatalism. And I think because of some of the real atrociousness of what we see in American public life right now, people who would really rather break the republic than share it, who would rather take down democracy rather than have it be for all of us. It's easy to fall into this notion of they'll never change, there's no hope, let's organize around them, let's build our little enclaves, let's mobilize our own side. And the reality is it doesn't work. Democracy is premised on the idea of changing minds in order to change things. And when we give up on the idea of persuasion, we open the door to tyrants, we open the door to political violence. And so I set out, not because I have the answers, I set out to report on people who I thought might have answers that I didn't, to help us figure out how we can win others over to the vision of multiracial democracy in this country and build a bigger we for that idea.
Well, let me add myself to make it 3 out of 3 who needs help in this discussion. We'll discuss in a minute on some of the many people you profile and organizations you profile that get it right, that are doing persuasion the way you just described. Did you have an epiphany, though? Did one of them cause you to see the error of your ways, or was it a gradual evolution on your part?
I mean, there's so many errors in so many of my ways. I mean, let me give you a couple examples, and these might resonate with folks, listening to this wherever you are. One thing is on disinformation, right? A lot of us in our families and communities now have people we know and care about who have succumbed to really outlandish fantasies of what's going on. There's QAnon, there's all kinds of things on the right. The Republican Party in many ways is in the grips of this kind of thing. And what I and many people do is tend to, argue back, counter, rebut the charges, sometimes make people feel stupid. It doesn't work. Some of the people I wrote about suggest the thing you got to do there is to play into people's desire to be critical thinkers and their desire not to be fools, and not rebut them, but try to show them how and why very powerful people are trying to con them for their own purposes. Another thing that I certainly did wrong that I realized is, a lot of what social media encourages, and I'm a big Twitter user for my sins, a lot of what social media encourages is a kind of, if someone doesn't get it perfectly or says the wrong thing slightly, just dunk on them as quickly as possible. And again, it's not how you build a bigger we. And so a lot of what the subjects I write about and the persuaders are thinking about and doing is, if you want a future that works where everyone can thrive, where everyone has a shot, how do you actually stand firmly and bravely for things? Because that's important. This is not moderation, as you said earlier, but also pull people in.
Yeah, no, I love the thing, and for people that want if they want to get enticed in to buy the book, you have a great piece just in the New York Times about the uncomfortable truths that could defeat fascism, when you talk about how those of us who think we're so woke should make some room for people who are still waking, instead of jumping down people's throats in about 2 seconds if they make a mistake with pronouns, for example.
And I think, the New York Times piece was in a way about what our leaders need to do, but I also, if you go, there's a free guide that I wrote on my website for the book, thepersuadersbook.com. It's a free guide you can download. That it's how you can do this interpersonally, right? How you can do this with the climate denier uncle. How you can do this with someone who's starting to go down that kind of QAnon YouTube rabbit hole. There are ways of talking to people that don't drive them further into these things. And I think the biggest thing so many of us are doing in our outrage and sadness and despair about what's happening to America, we're actually pushing more people down the road of madness instead of pulling them toward us.
Well, you have a lot of examples, but give us one that you hearken to first when you're talking about people who are good at persuasion.
I wrote about this experiment called deep canvassing. And by the way, a lot of people listening to GBH have been asking for years, what can I do, right? What can I do to get involved? Well, here's the thing you can do to get involved. It's a longer term thing. There's other things you can do before the midterms, but deep canvassing is a thing where people get trained a few hours online, and then they go door to door in their communities or other communities as neighbors, knocking on doors. Now, everyone listening to this has had canvassers come to their house for 15 seconds. Here's a flyer. Do you have a plan to vote? This is not that, right? Deep canvassing is staying on the door for half an hour, 40 minutes. And what happens is these canvassers, and they're working in every state in the union right now, they try to have deep, meaningful conversations to help people process their own prejudices, their own views about different communities, groups, issues, and what these canvassers do, instead of saying, well, you're wrong about this, or you're wrong about that, or instead of trying to plant the kind of microchip of their view in that person's head, which if you've been married, you know does not work. What these canvassers try to stir up cognitive dissonance within those people, right? Okay, so you think immigrants are XYZ. Okay, but do you know any immigrants? And the immigrants you know, are they like the description you just said? Or have you ever felt shut out and scorned because of factors beyond your control? How did that feel? What was that like for you? And it may sound corny, but I have watched these videos. I watched it live in Arizona. You see people, in one of these most amazing deep canvassing videos, this young woman at the door is talking about being repulsed by her own transitioning niece. And she's saying kind of bad things about her niece, and she's treated her niece kind of badly. And then this canvasser asks her, have you ever been kind of marginalized? And she was a young black woman. Interestingly, she didn't say it because she was a woman or black. Those may have been what you were kind of expecting if you're watching this video. She says, when I moved to LA, I got this job, and everybody in my job was like, you should go back to the city you came from. You don't belong here in LA with us. And you see this, and then they say, how did that make you feel? And you see this woman suddenly, who's been talking about her trans niece for 15 minutes. You see this woman have this epiphany on her face like, oh God, they are me. I am them. I am doing to my niece what they did to me. And people need help connecting these things. And I think the right-wing ecosystem, media ecosystem, political ecosystem is actually very good at taking people from the initial stimulus of what they see in their society to, really awful doctrinaire positions. And I think the political left has failed at that kind of what organizers call meaning making. And I think we need to get in the game.
We talk about something? We're talking to, by the way, Anand Girdadas, whose book is The Persuaders at the Front Lines of the Fight for Hearts, Minds, and Democracy. Someone who I think has made a serious attempt at meaning making, who was sort of a centrist kind of guy and then all of a sudden started championing progressive policies, was the President of the United States. To use some of the terms I've heard from you, you meet people where they are, listen, be respectful of all, and that sort of, it seems to me he attempted, wildly unsuccessfully, to practice exactly what you and the people you profile are preaching. Why was he such a failure at being a persuader?
Why was Joe Biden such a failure at it?
Yeah.
I mean, well, I wouldn't say, I would say two things. I think he has attempted some of these things that I'm talking about. I think he has not done others. I would agree with you that Joe Biden, who had a career as a moderate, proved persuadable himself, which allowed him to then endeavor to be persuasive. He is a coalitional leader. He's less of a singular star than Clinton and Obama were. And so I think he was open to where the energy and vitality in his coalition were. And in recent years, they were more on the progressive side, even though they didn't win the argument in the primary. And so he, to his great credit, was willing to really go there. And he, this guy proposed 3 separate $1 trillion spending bills in his first year and got a lot passed, even though not everything Bernie Sanders would have wanted. So to his credit, I think he recognized that he was living in a new progressive era, even though he's not a progressive. And he bent to the era to a certain extent. Now, in terms of his persuasive outreach, I think he does some of these things that I'm writing about in the book well. I think he's good at meeting people where they are. He's good at reasonableizing things. He takes things that seem scary to people, like massive climate programs, and he just makes it seem like we're America, we can do anything. Like, he kind of takes the power out of a lot of stuff and just makes it seem like all American and basic. I think that's, some of that is very good. Here's where I think Biden could do more. And I've, shared this with people who work around him very openly. I think there is a storytelling need right now. The far right, is telling a very clear, simple us and them story about America, right? Now, it's a disastrous story. And most of the people listening to this are probably not included in that story if they've made the mistake of being a woman or a person of color or, not wealthy. But it's a story. And I don't know that Joe Biden is telling a story about America right now. Not inflation reduction, this policy, that, all that's great. But what is the story? What is the thrilling, galvanizing story about this country that is the closing argument in these midterms? And then saturating that story through what I would, suggest is like reinvented fireside chats. Let's get on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Friday 4 p.m. or whatever. We need to be narrated through this moment. I think a lot of what the right has understood in this time, you both understand as excellent broadcasters, is that people need to be walked through change, right? That's why people come listen to you. They see what's happening in their lives, but they need to be walked through it, right? That's what we in the media do. We walk with people through what they are seeing and provide some explanation, provide some comfort. And I think we need that from our leaders as well.
And what we are doing, as you point out, is we're always waiting for the next indictments. We're always looking at, what is the next horrible thing that's going to happen to Trump. But you also talk about, too, not wanting to be too centrist. And I think a lot of people think Biden was able to get elected because he was more of a moderate Democrat. But you have a great example out in Kenosha, Wisconsin, when there was all this unrest after Jacob Blake. That young man was shot multiple times, and Joe Biden went and gave a speech there. And I think what you were saying was he was making the argument that his opponents on the right might have made instead of a different kind of argument. What was that about?
I think one of the profoundest things I learned in reporting the book was from a communications expert named Anat Shenker-Osorio, who I think is the real hero of political messaging on the left right now, and really an ascendant voice in helping Democrats think about how to win and beat fascism. And one of the things she taught me that, again, Marjorie, goes back to like, what was I doing wrong, was I think most of us in a conversation think about what our position is in a conversation. So we're having a conversation, I'm attentive to what am I saying. I think most of us don't think as much about what conversation am I having? Whose conversation am I having, right? So if you say, not you, if someone says to me, immigrants are animals, and I respond, immigrants are not animals. Now, my position is correct that immigrants are in fact not animals. However, I have now been drafted into and I've consented to having a conversation about the animalness of immigrants. That's the topic of the conversation. And that is not my topic. That is not favorable to the discussion. I don't want those words associated in people's minds. I don't want to be repeating those two words together, right? I'm doing the work of the other side by doing that. And so what Biden did in Kenosha is what so many Democrats do on the question of police violence, protests, riots. They get so afraid of this white working class voter that they feel a need to say law and order is really important, rioting's bad, protesting's bad. Now, or pushing back again, or almost equating protests and some of the violence that sometimes happens in protests with the original violence that caused these acts of resistance. And the problem is when you do that, you are consenting. You may be right or wrong in the sentences you say about riots. The problem is now Joe Biden has entered into a conversation about riots. He's entered into a conversation about murder and mayhem, right? That's the conversation that he's choosing to build up into a bigger conversation than it was before the President of the United States opened his mouth on it. And in doing that, he's elevating a conversation that is never going to be good for his side, right? And so I think, again, whether you're Joe Biden or whether you're a regular person listening to GBH at home or driving somewhere, you can think about, are you constantly reacting to outrages from the right? Is most of your political expression or text messages or social media posts inspired by the right does something and then you say, I think X? Or are you painting a thrilling vision of the future that is so exciting to people? And by the way, saying, these jerks over here are trying to make that vision impossible, come with me. It's very different to lead with the world we want and mention these reactionaries who are trying to block it. rather than center the reactionaries so that we almost falsely turn them into the protagonists of the story, which they are not.
So what should he have said to give us that thrilling, optimistic vision of America?
Anat, in my chapter, Anat gave a very tangible example of what he could have done, which is there was first a protest and a march in honor of Jacob Blake, and then a few days later, there was a celebration of his life on the stretch where he was shot. And it was an incredible celebration. Some of you may have seen this video of it that went very viral. There was line dancing, there was a bouncy castle, there was voter registration happening, there was guys grilling stuff for people, kids were there, there were celebrity guests. I think Reverend Jesse Jackson was there. And it was this celebration of life. It was politics. It was, and it was showing what they were for. We're not just against black people being shot by police. We are for thriving. We're for black people and all people being able to live beautiful, thriving, flourishing lives. And police, when they shoot people in the back, get in the way of this thing we're for, right? And a lot of that thing went incredibly viral, videos of that celebration, right? Beautiful vision of saying what we're for. So Anat's very practical idea for the White House, for example, for Joe Biden would have been, he was not in the White House then, for Joe Biden would have been, to show footage of that ad, right? Yeah. Show footage of the line dancing and the bouncy castles and the voter registration and the barbecuing and say, something about no matter where we come from or what we believe, we all want safety for our children, opportunities, this and that, these things we have in common. And police get in the way of that sometimes. Donald Trump is trying to stoke violence and division, but when we come together, we can have beautiful lives together, right? That kind of thing. Showing what you're for. And that's just one of the many lessons that Anat has in the book that I think we all can benefit from, because we have all gotten lulled, I think, into being perpetually in reaction to outrage and, as you mentioned earlier, Marjorie, perpetually waiting for, Daddy Bob Mueller or Daddy Merrick Garland to play this father figure rescue of the nation. I'm sorry, these are not our fathers, and they're not coming to save us. You have to be part of a bigger, better, more feisty, more expansive, more open-hearted movement than they have if you want to win. The only way to beat fascism is to beat it.
And the book is great. And for all you cynics out there like us, it will beat away some of the cynicism in your brain. Go get it. The Persuaders at the front lines of the fight for hearts, minds, and democracy. Anand Girdadas. Anand, it's great to see you. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And if you want that free guide, go to thepersuadersbook.com.
Yeah,
Persuadersbook.com.
Hold on, give it to us one more time.
Thepersuadersbook.com.
Okay.
Great.
I need that. Thank you very much.
So do we all.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Okay. We've been speaking with journalist Anand Girdadas. His latest book is The Persuaders at the Front Lines of the Fight for Hearts, Minds, and Democracy. And he raises a million great points, Jim. I'm going to try to reform myself now. Okay. Up next, CNN's John King joins us to preview Jim's appointment television viewing tonight. That would be the Pennsylvania Senate debate between John Fetterman and Amendment Oz and a bunch of other national headlines. You are listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming at
The quality local news and thoughtful conversations you hear each day on GBH are made possible by listener contributions. When you become a GBH member or leader, you join a community of supporters who share a passion for lifelong learning. As patrons of the Champions or Beacon Circles, you also enjoy benefits that bring you even closer to the heart of GBH's mission to educate, entertain, and inspire. Learn more about the new ways you can make an impact online at gbh.org/growtogether.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Comcast Business, providing technology solutions for your starting or growing small business, including internet, phone, and Comcast Business Security Edge. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply, actual speeds vary. And the DeMoore McKim School of Business at Northeastern University, where students can prepare to meet the changing demands of the digital economy by solving real business challenges. northeastern.edu/future of business.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Braude and Marjorie. We're joined now on Zoom by CNN's chief national correspondent. That'd be John King. John is also the host of Inside Politics, weekdays at noon. Hello, John King.
Hello to you. 2 weeks out.
Yeah.
2 weeks out.
2 weeks from today.
2 weeks out, and I think things are trending toward the GOP.
Yes. Be careful not to overgeneralize, but if you look at the data, it's just unmistakable. Doesn't mean that things are done. We should never disrespect the voters when they're about their business. But you do see a tightening of the races, and you also see more races in play. When you look at the House, I think it's now quite likely, barring some major change in the campaign dynamic, that the Republicans take the majority. They only need a net gain of 5. And so you see now some races in suburban New York districts tilting toward Republicans. Doesn't mean the Republicans are going to win them, but they were viewed as either likely Democrat or solid Democrat, and they're being pushed softer in the rankings. Even the New York governor's race, you have a big debate tonight there. That one's tightened up a little bit. Kathy Hochul, the Democratic incumbent, still has a lead, but it's tightened up. And you look at the Senate, there's a big debate in Pennsylvania tonight. I know you're interested in that. Fetterman-Oz. Again, the Senate, is it going to be, to stay 50-50? Can Democrats get +1? Can Republicans get +1 or +2? Some Republicans think +3 is still a possibility. The Senate is the biggest question mark, I guess, heading into the final 2 weeks. But it's there's a lot of competitive races out there.
I've watched a decent number of the debates, John, most notably probably the one in Georgia between Warnock and Herschel Walker the other night. And, we're often asked when we talk about debates on the show, do debates really matter? It would seem to me that the Fetterman-Oz debate tonight really, really matters, particularly to Lieutenant Governor Fetterman, does it not?
I think you're right in the sense that there has been a question of his health since his stroke back in May. I think that there are some people who think Dr. Oz has overplayed that card, and in some ways that either Oz or his staff have been mean about it, if you will, or crude about it. But I do think that, Lieutenant Governor Fetterman, who wants to serve in the Senate, they're going to have this unique arrangement. There'll be 2 big monitors over the head of the debate moderators so that he can use the closed captioning. And nobody should take offense at that. He has auditory issues because of his stroke. As someone who faces challenges because of neurological disease that I have, we watch people in wheelchairs. We watch people with canes. We watch people deal with hearing aids. But I do think some voters have a question of, has he recovered enough? Is he fit enough to serve in the Senate? That's challenge number 1. I also think this is huge for Oz, Jim, in the sense that this race is very, very close. And if you look deep into the polling, one of the reasons it's close is that Fetterman gets, 97, 98% of the Democrats. Oz is getting a smaller percentage of Republicans. And I think a lot of Republicans, I was up in the Pittsburgh suburbs, upscale Pittsburgh suburbs 10 days ago, almost 2 weeks ago. And a lot of Republicans there who voted for George H.W. Bush, voted for George W. Bush, some of whom voted for Trump the first time and then said, whoa, this is not who we want or what we want in a president. They're not sure who Oz is. So Oz is trying to prove himself both to Trump voters, is he one of them, and to more traditional suburban moderates who moved away from Trump. So I think both of them have, in a race so close that you could not, the stakes are enormous. We could use any adjective we want. And so number 1, it's can they make their direct appeals? And number 2, do we actually get a policy debate here? Or do we get more snark back and forth?
I do wonder if Fetterman prevails. Does he wear his hoodies and his cargo shorts into the Senate? I mean,
he had a tie and a suit on when President Biden came to town the other day.
I wondered about that. Is there a dress code in the Senate, John?
You know what? When I was a print guy, I didn't like wearing these ties in my suit. So we all have to make transitions sometimes. It happens.
Well, let's talk about Florida for a second. I know Ron DeSantis is supposed to win down there. He's the governor, and Charlie Crist is running against him. He's the Democrat. Let's play a little sound from this debate last night. I thought this might have been a little rude of Ron DeSantis. Here we go.
I just want to make things very, very clear. The only worn-out old donkey I'm looking to put out to pasture is Charlie Crist.
That's who he is. Why are you surprised?
Because he got a big hand, and I know that some people like that, and it's very Trumpy, I guess. But I don't know if everybody can carry it off the way Trump did. And Ron DeSantis did not look like a skilled debater from what I saw of that debate last night. He was, as the stories this morning say, gritting his teeth and not able to really answer a lot of the questions about abortion or about running for a second term, staying his full term, those kinds of things.
It was clear to me that he doesn't like to be challenged. He would have preferred not to have been there. I also think it was clear to me that he was playing it, trying to be cautious and stick to sort of, poll-tested scripts. That an individual voter might disagree with his position, say, after 15 weeks banning abortions, you might agree or disagree with that. But DeSantis was trying to stick to the script and then not talk beyond it. He wouldn't answer the question. You played the sound there. That was about Charlie Crist trying to get him to pledge that he would not run for president in 2024 and he would serve a full 4-year term. Again, you're right. That might sound a little crass or mean to some people. It plays to the Trump base, which has its own nickname for the president of the United States. And, Charlie Crist is a well-known name in Florida politics. He was the Republican governor, then he was an independent, now he's a Democrat. And so I think DeSantis is trying to tap into the, Charlie Crist has been a little bit of everything in politics, which a lot of people don't like politicians. But I think it's without a doubt, Marjorie, he was very, very cautious. You raise a question that we're going to have to wait to answer, which is assuming he wins re-election. And again, we shouldn't assume anything when people are voting, but the polls suggest DeSantis will win re-election. Can he sell himself outside Florida as successfully as he has sold himself inside Florida? I think that's a big TBD in American politics.
And I assume Val Demings has no chance against Marco Rubio, even though I thought she was very good in the debate.
Florida is when you get late in a campaign like this, and again, anybody out there listening, beware listening to anybody who tells you they know how things are going to happen. And again, people are voting, and I think we will have some surprises in the midterm election year. Florida has increasingly become a Republican state.
Yeah.
So I always talk about Donald Trump should respect math. He lost the last election, was narrowly in some states, but he lost. You have to respect math. Florida, if you look at Florida, its DNA has become more and more Republican. That does not mean Democrats cannot surprise you. It does not mean some Republican can offend enough Republicans that they either stay home or go vote for a Democrat. But if you look at the data in that state, it would point you to Rubio and to DeSantis being in a safe place or a comfortable place anyway for re-election. But because of the age we live in and because of the volatility in recent years, I say that's what the data suggest. Now let's let people vote.
John, in light of the fact that virtually every political prediction I've ever made is wrong, let me make another one or two. I was mentioning to one of our guests before, who's from Ohio, that I'm of the belief that Tim Ryan really gets what a lot of Democrats don't get about working class people. He's the Democratic nominee for the Senate from Ohio against J.D. Vance. And I suggested to our guest, I think off the air, that if he were to win that race, he would become a front runner for the Democratic nomination for president, should Biden not run. On the Republican side, Carrie Lake is almost, in my estimation, manufactured in a lab for where the Republican Party is. She obviously is the Republican, a Trumper running, election denier running for governor in Arizona. A lot of things going. Far better talker than Trump, far better looking than Trump, faster. Really has it. A former TV personality. And when I was watching Dana Bash's, your colleague's interview with her, where she was really belligerent the other day, the only thing that was more unbelievable to me than her belligerence was her Democratic opponent's unwillingness to answer any questions about anything, including why she is unwilling to debate this woman who has totally dominated the campaign, it seems to me, as a result, for governor in Arizona. What's the word on this strategic thinking of people like Hobbs who've decided to not engage their opponent, obviously for strategic reasons?
Her strategic reason is that, that Carrie Lake is more polished, a better performer, a better communicator, therefore she would win the debate. I think you could make the contrarian argument that if you could try to make it about policy and actually air your substantive differences and make the point it doesn't matter how you say something, or how good you look when you say something, or how colorful you are when you say something, it should matter what you're going to do as governor, where your heart is and where your policy is. But Katie Hobbs has decided not to do that. I haven't been to Arizona in this cycle, Jim, so I'm a little bit hesitant to talk about the impact. I will say that the Democratic strategists I email with and text with and talk to here in Washington, D.C., most of them think it's a mistake. They get it. They get it that Carrie Lake is a very polished, accomplished communicator with all those years of television experience as an anchor woman and a correspondent. But they still think that, you have to, part of the idea to convince the people you're tough enough for the job as governors, you got to be willing to stand up there against your opponent. We'll see how that one plays out. But, strategists I respect believe it is a mistake. Again, sometimes the voters surprise us.
And the point I was trying to make that I never made, I realize, is I think if Lake wins that race, she becomes a front runner for the Republican nomination. Speaking of Trump, Marjorie and I were having a conversation before the show this morning. A former president of the United States company is being tried in a criminal trial for tax fraud. And it's one of the biggest non-stories of the day. You've been doing this for 40 years? Can you imagine any former president ever having his business criminally charged and tried, and it's almost like a third-tier kind of news story?
In an odd way, that is one of the cynical reasons, I'm trying to choose my words carefully, that Donald Trump, quote unquote, gets away with a lot of this stuff because he's constantly in controversy, constantly. And it's almost become sort of like an air conditioner on in the room that it's humming and you just learn to ignore it. I'm not justifying that. We have people covering this trial. We will continue to cover this trial, but I think you're absolutely right. Not only does it not get the attention one would expect it to get, because Trump is, again, the Mueller investigation, he calls them witch hunts. These have been legitimate investigations, even if they have not turned up anything that has been, conviction-wise, or the impeachment did not pass in the Senate. It was not a conviction in the Senate. The underpinnings of all these investigations were based on probable cause, put it that way. But it's part of how he gets away with it by saying everybody's after me, everybody's after me, everybody's after me. As striking about the sort of the why is this not a big deal question is he continues to be the leader of a major political party in this country. They continue to raise money off his name. They continue to seek his endorsement, and they continue to let him define their party. Would that have ever happened 5 or 10 years ago or with any other human being on the planet? I think not.
It's interesting. The longtime chief financial officer of this company, Alan Weisenberg, who's going to be testifying in this trial, he is not really going to turn on Trump, at least he said, in any big way. He was, despite the pressure he's had from prosecutors, but Trump's lawyers are going to call him a liar, and they're going to basically throw him under the bus. If he's found out to be lying, he may get more time in prison than what he's arranged with the prosecutors. I think he's got 5 months to serve, or he's got maybe 100 days for good behavior. But it is interesting that dynamic. He's remained loyal to Donald Trump, but the Trump organization has not remained loyal to him, even though he is on paid leave. It's kind of
that's one of the reasons you actually want to be in the courtroom to cover contentious trials, is they can take interesting turns too. So we'll see. Trump lawyers have a strategy. We'll see if it's a smart strategy or not.
John, do you think at all about after November 8th, what happens if a majority of election deniers control a House of Congress in the United States and potentially 2 houses of Congress? What do you think about that?
I don't think a majority of election deniers would control the Senate, even if the Republicans took it, but you'd have a fair number of election deniers in positions of responsibility. If you put them on truth serum, you do not have a majority of House Republicans who actually believe that Donald Trump won the last election, but your point is very well taken. You have a whole lot of people who are either, some believe it, some parrot the line because Trump wants them, and the rest of them stick their head in the sand and avoid standing up to the lunacy and telling the truth and saying, I will not stand for this. Joe Biden won fair and square. Why don't we focus on trying to win the next election, not lying about the last one? You raise a key point. And Jim, you're having a conversation about here in Washington, and I think it's a very important one, but states run the elections too. And for me, the most immediate concern is the number of governors who might get elected who believe this, the number of secretary of states who might get elected who believe this, and the number of state legislators or even city council members and school committees, pick your elected office, who get elected who believe this. Because this, I say it every week, and I'm sorry to be a broken record, but this is a cancer in the bloodstream of American politics. Yes, it is in the Republican Party right now. But all Americans should be concerned about it, because we just have to be able to agree on a basic set of facts and a basic set of rules for how our elections are administered. And if we don't have that, then it does call into question the foundation, the building blocks of our democracy. And if we open that door, I don't want to open that door. And I think we've opened it a crack. And the question is, do we pull it open further in this election, or do we start to push it shut? I wish we would slam it shut. We're not going to get that far. I would hope we close that gap. I'm afraid it's going to get pulled open.
One last thing, John King, before we even get to the election, you're reading more and more about real fears of violence at the polls and reading stories about poll workers quitting in droves because of they're concerned about their own safety or they just don't want to go through this hassle. What do we see leading up to the election?
Well, you're starting to see a modest number so far, but any number is too much. Your point about threats to election workers and people resigning from the jobs because it's just not worth it anymore. It's not like they're high-paying jobs in many of these places. That you're not making a ton of money. You're civil servants doing the critical work of elections and democracy, and you're just getting harassed all the time or called a cheater, verbally harassed, phone calls, in some cases death threats up the chain. We also are now seeing vigilantes essentially camping out around drop boxes and questioning people and harassing people as they show up. Again, the number of incidents so far has been relatively modest, but why is this happening at all? This is the United States of America. You have every right. If you want to form a group and stand outside a ballot drop box and watch people voting, you have every right to do that. But to put on tactical gear and show up with weapons and to harass people and to video people, again, there's a First Amendment, and there are different states have different laws and different police departments decide how to enforce these things. I wish we could get back to a place of just common courtesy and common decency. But I'm naive to think that's going to happen in this election cycle. We already see how naive I am to even suggest it, and we'll see if it gets worse as we get closer to Election Day.
John, before you go, I know you're very meticulous about never saying I prefer this candidate over that candidate, but I think you have to violate your rule. Zappy or Jones, who's your guy?
I think now you got to let Jones play and give him a couple of games, and then you see how it goes from here. You have to pick one anyway. Pick anyone. I would pick Mac Jones just for seniority and give him the chance. Last night was pretty embarrassing. You also need speed.
It was awful.
You also need speed on defense.
Bad
you sort of what?
You also need speed on defense. They had nobody who could contain the quarterback, and so that's what happens. One very quick point. I was up there last Thursday night for a charity event to raise money for Cobman Square Health Clinic.
Yes.
And almost everybody under the tent for a great cause told me how much they love Jim and Marjorie. How much they love Jim and Marjorie, how much they love Jim and Marjorie. You guys are rock stars.
Well, let me just say, you've come up for this. This is Codman Square, great healthcare center, and you've emceed a number of years. I know I actually spoke to the governor afterwards, mentioned you were there. It's a wonderful cause. It's called Men Who Cook, by the way, or at least attempt to, and we should have been there, and we will next year, but good for you for making the trip, John King.
You guys should run for mayor or governor or something when there's an opening.
Hold on.
No, let's not.
Jim did run for governor.
That was a week. I did it for 1 week.
7-day campaign.
Goodbye, John King. It's a pleasure to see you. Take care of yourself.
Sorry for peeling the Band-Aid.
See you next week. Bye, John.
Thank you very much, John King, for being with us. We're speaking with John King, who is, of course, from Dorchester, and he's also CNN's chief national correspondent and the host of Inside Politics, which you can catch weekdays at noon. We want you here every day, even though we're not supposed to be looking at it at noon. Up next, we're going to continue the political conversation by asking you about Ted Cruz' no good, very bad week in New York, from being booed at a Yankees game to getting interrupted during a live interview on The View. Where's the line for appropriate protesting? And would you keep your mouth shut if you saw Ted Cruz at Fenway Park? You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
California voted to ban the sale of all pork from mama pigs confined in tiny pens. Pork producers say they can't afford to comply. The Supreme Court will decide. We're discussing the ethical and constitutional questions at the heart of Proposition 12. I'm Melissa Harris Perry, and that's next time on The Takeaway from WNYC and PRX.
This afternoon at 2, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Vantage Healthcare, providing primary care physicians throughout New England. Vantage brings their primary care team on site to assisted living communities, nursing homes, and more. Learn more at myvantagehcs.com. And Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, offering Medicare Advantage plans with new benefits like enhanced dental coverage, as well as a broad network of doctors, hospitals, and specialists. BlueCrossMA.com/go.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Brady and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the Boston Public Library. We're streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. You know, this next discussion, I had forgotten before we had this discussion with listeners, we were going to be talking to Anand Girdadas about engaging people with whom you disagree rather than going at them. But on a recent trip to New York, Senator Ted Cruz was not only booed at a Yankees game, but also had a live interview with The View interrupted multiple times by protesters in the audience. We've talked a lot on this show with you about where to draw the line with protesting public figures, like when protesters followed Kirsten Sinema into the bathroom in Arizona. I would have done that. But is this just another example of our political climate hardening, not talking to people with whom we disagree, ultimately leading us down a path of violence, like when the people protested outside of politicians' homes, like with Mayor Wu, or is little booing at a Yankees game just the right amount of disapproval for a man who's really hard to embrace? The number is 877-301-8097. You can call us or text us at that number. Does this run afoul? We should have asked them this question. I forgot we were doing this. Does this run afoul of the theory, the theme of the Persuaders about attempting to talk with people? It does,
runs afoul of the theme of the Persuaders.
So when I say I was really moved by the Persuaders and would like to be more like he describes, and at the same time I cheer the fact that they were booing Ted Cruz at a Yankees game, I am...
Well, I think this is one of these things where you maybe cheer the people booing Ted Cruz because you don't like Ted Cruz. If they were booing somebody else at a Yankees game, like, you know, say Mayor Wu or something, you might feel differently about it, right?
Here's a little sound. Can we play a little sound? Here's a little sound of him at the Yankees-Astros game at Yankee Stadium. This is on Sunday. Here it is. So they're not just booing him. You couldn't make that out. Amidst the boos, it was effing loser, racist piece of blank, woman hater, go back to Cancun. The go back to Cancun, I think, is a pretty good one. 877-301-8097. You know, again, I know this runs afoul of what Anand is talking about, but I am of the belief that when you have done so much to damage the lives of people in this country, you are fair game for almost anything. And I would argue being booed at a baseball game or being interrupted by people in an audience on The View is a mild form of response to the kinds of damage Ted Cruz has done to this country.
Okay,
so I'm totally fine with it.
Let's get closer to home, though. There were people protesting outside of Mayor Wu's house in Rossendale, and very early in the morning, calling her bad things, comparing him to Nazis and all this kind of stuff, because they viewed that her edicts about getting vaccinations had cost them their jobs, and they were going to lose their livelihood. So from their perspective, being anti-vaxxers, they thought they were entitled to harass her every morning she went to work. What do you think about that?
Well, I think I said to her, I know you're against it. The thing with her kids and her mother being there changes the equation for me. I think that makes it inappropriate. If they didn't live there, I know you don't like this, I'm probably okay with it.
So suppose the Cruzettes were with Ted at Yankee Stadium.
Let me be totally clear here. If I had an opportunity to demonstrate in Ted Cruz's bedroom, I would. 877-301-8097. I know the point Marjorie's trying to make, which unfortunately is probably true. People like me are hypocrites when it comes to things like that. If it's somebody who we have contempt for, like Senator Cruz, I'm okay with virtually everything. And if it's somebody you respect, you go a little easier, which is not the way you should make your decisions. Lisa, you're in Rhode Island. You're first on Boston Public Radio. Welcome.
Pretty much agree with you, Jim, except I don't want to be anywhere near Ted Cruz's bedroom.
That's a good
That's
point,
probably a good
Lisa.
point, yeah.
I think that because they're a public figure, they are subject to any public discourse that comes their way when they are in public. I think I would draw the line at protesting outside anybody's house, maybe set a quarter mile away or something. But if they're driving by in the car, I'd certainly be happy to show my displeasure with Mr. Cruz or anybody of his ilk.
Lisa, don't go away. I think it happened to Cruz. I may be wrong, but I know that it happened to Huckabee Sanders when she was eating in a restaurant somewhere. Yeah. Former press secretary. I think she's running for governor. Is she not of Arkansas? I'm not sure. Former press secretary. Thank you, Aiden, for obviously Donald Trump, they interrupted her meal with her family. And am I right? She had to leave through the back door or some such thing. This is 2-3 years, well, obviously a couple years ago. How you feel about that, Lisa?
I think outside the restaurant will be fine, but if I was sitting next to her, I'd probably be distressed at having people disturbing me during my meal. I think most of it is about being polite. Like, don't disturb people that aren't affected in a small enclosed space, but outside the restaurant, I'd have no problem.
Lisa, thanks for the call. You know, someone just wrote us a note, and unfortunately it just disappeared. Right after the Uvalde shooting, Cruz was was confronted at a restaurant because of his position on guns. And I have to say, I'm not unhappy about that. Again, I know that a lot of people will say that crosses the line. You shouldn't be doing that kind of thing. When you're taking a position that is about life and death for children, I think you run for office, you got to pay a price. And so I am also okay with that, frankly.
Yeah, it says he was heckled. Did you say it was in Houston? It was at a Houston restaurant.
Restaurant, yeah.
But to get back to Wu again, I think one of the problems for the protests outside her house is that she's in a
residential neighborhood,
right,
yeah.
You know, the houses on either side of her, only a few feet away. The whole neighborhood on her block was getting woken up at 7 o'clock in the morning by people shouting through bullhorns. So you could make that same argument. If you want to protest Mayor Wu, wait till she arrives at City Hall and scream at her.
Well, that's what the law now says. Or you have to wait till after 9 o'clock in the morning. Right.
And of course
when she's gone, right.
Then. But come to City Hall. But you were big on this when you're protesting days, weren't you, Jim?
Let's not talk about that. Sarah Huckabee didn't have to escape. She was politely asked to leave. It was called the Red Hen in Lexington,
yeah, the people that ran
Virginia.
the restaurant didn't like her either.
Right, I believe that's the case. But they were, yeah, that's right. Nina in Waltham, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Hey, Nina, what's up?
I was just thinking, you know, Ted Cruz does this for performance. He knows better. He doesn't believe half of what he says. He's doing this for a specific audience. And the business about persuading, he's not one you're going to persuade. He knows better. He knows exactly what he's doing. Half of what he says he knows is not true. So there's sort of no point in trying to persuade him. So, and yes, as a public figure, he absolutely deserves what he gets.
You know, Nina, I think it was Lindsey Graham, as a testament to the odiousness of Ted Cruz, said that if Ted Cruz were beaten to death or murdered on the floor of the Senate,
with every senator there,
watching it, no one would testify against the murderer. So his own companions in the Senate, and people talk about when he was at Harvard, I think Juliet Kayan was a classmate of his at Harvard.
Jennifer Becerra, I think.
Oh, Jennifer
was,
Becerra, okay, I'm sorry.
Right, yeah.
But brilliant guy, but much hated by everyone. And, you know, his poor wife, I guess she's long suffering.
Well, it's not just because he's fake. He is, you know, as that line, which I've overused, cruelty is the point. And I think it is with him and DeSantis and people like them. Nina, thanks for a great call. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970. That was a pretty good line. That was a great line by the way, you are also, you know, there's certain words that perfectly capture what you're trying to say better than others. Odious is one, you just used that.
He's odious.
Is one of the best, is that one of the best words in the English language?
It's a good one.
Doesn't that scream what you're trying to say? I just love it.
It's a good one. It's a good one. Sam from Lincoln, thank you for calling.
Hey, Sam.
Hey, how's it going?
Fine, thank you.
Slime ball. Slime ball is another good description.
Slime ball, yep. Not quite as elevated.
Go ahead, Sam.
But the thing that I want to say was you can't have a conversation with a person if you can't agree on the basic facts. And Ted Cruz is a lying slime ball. You know, slime ball. He lies about
odious, right?
He's odious.
And odious, too. But what's there to talk about? If you can't agree on the basic facts, there's absolutely no point in having a conversation.
You know, Sam, you should have been doing the interview of Anand Girdadas. That is a really important question. Even if you subscribe to the notion that you have to have conversations and try to meet them where they are, if you don't agree on the underlying, as you say, what was the great line by the former senator from New York State?
Oh, Moynihan, you're entitled to your own facts, but
no, you're entitled to your own opinion. You're not entitled to your own facts. That's a wonderful point, Sam. That is a divider that is really hard to overcome. Thanks for the call. By the way, the exact quote from Lindsey Graham, you're pretty close. If you killed Ted Cruz on the floor of the Senate and the trial was in the Senate, nobody nobody would convict you.
Yeah.
That is really one of the cleverest lines ever.
You know what Girardas said, though, argued, which we didn't get to?
What's that?
That he was saying the right understands people's anxieties, particularly
right.
working class white people's anxieties, in a way the left doesn't, and the left tends
Well,
to...
it's pretend, though, like with Trump. I mean, one of the people say about Trump, that's his great appeal to that anxious middle.
But people on the left, and I'm now, I didn't used to be so far on the left. Trump did it to me, pushed me further and further to the left. But we need to stop telling people not to worry about what they're worried about. And crime has become this huge thing all across the country, even though crime rates in a lot of places, including New York City, as the Hochul has tried to say, race are down. It doesn't matter. If you're afraid of it, if you're afraid of getting shoved in front of a subway train in New York City, or you're afraid of going to New York because of that, it doesn't matter that the crime rates are down. You know what I mean?
Well, you know what it's called? Ronald Reagan elevated to an art form. It's either called campaigning by anecdote or governing by anecdote. Is you take one story and that becomes who Willie Horton is probably a pretty good example of what Michael Dukakis became in 1988 because of that notorious furlough. Linda in a car, hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
So my opinion is that I don't think anyone should be accosted at their homes. I don't think there should be protesting at anyone's homes. However, if you are out in public, then and you have protests near you, then you have to deal with it. I believe that if you go on political life, then you have to deal with the newspaper. You have to deal with the reporters, protesters. The same as if you're famous, if you become famous, you got to deal with paparazzi. You got to deal with all that stuff. And I believe that if you're in political life, that's what you got to deal with.
I think that's a great dividing line, Linda. That's a great call, great thought. Thank you for making it.
I remember when I was at the Herald, a great reporter, Maggie Mulvihill, did a lot of crime, did a lot of political stuff. Paul Cellucci, who was then the governor, the late Paul Cellucci.
Oh, she went to Hudson.
Wasn't answering questions. She got in the car, drove to Hudson. He's in the kitchen making pasta.
I remember the story.
She calls him. He's over. The steam is coming up from the plate and everything else. And she asked him a few questions because he wouldn't, or his people wouldn't return her phone calls.
But I don't think, would anybody really object? I mean, only people who don't understand journalism. He's the governor of the state, not answering a question. You have to go where he is if he won't come to where you are.
I guess that was
You wouldn't have done that? Of course you would.
I forget the particular circumstances about what it was that she wouldn't answer. But yeah, I mean, I've gone after politicians, I must admit.
Can one of our colleagues check? We have 3 people in a row, not in a row, but within a minute or two, have texted that I read that Cruz hid in a utility closet during January 6th. Saying he's a coward. Well, I mean, no better than, what's the name of the guy from Missouri who was gone with
Josh Hawley.
Josh Hawley with a clenched fist and then running like a little whatever, as we saw in that great video. We have time for, do we? Yes, we do. A couple of more. David in a car. Hi.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
So my thing is, Ted Cruz gets paid a lot of money to do what he does. He does it well. He connects with a certain crowd, not my crowd by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think there's anything wrong with people at a baseball game reaching out. I mean, they heckle players, they heckle everybody. It's that kind of place that it's a ruckus. It's a big, huge party, and booing Ted Cruz, God bless him. But my thing is, you know what the difference between Eddie Munster and Ted Cruz is?
What?
No. Eddie Munster and Ted Cruz look alike, but at least Eddie Munster tried to do the right thing. In the show, him and Grandpa, they tried to do the right thing. They were good people on that show, even though it's called The Monsters. But look at Ted Cruz. He's a monster. He's not trying to do the right thing. He's just evil. So that's my comment.
Good analysis. Thanks. By the way, Cruz, our colleagues, Jamie just told us, in his own memoir out this week, acknowledges that he hid in a supply closet during the, which is probably a wise thing to do. But he's another one who's trying to minimize how horrible an insurrection like January 6th was, is he not?
Yeah, I think he's downplayed it considerably. I think most of the Republicans have downplayed it considerably. Not right after it happened. At least a few of them were of an opinion that it was a disaster, and they blamed the president, including Kevin McCarthy.
Speaking of disaster, we only have a minute left. The short attention span of the American people, I thought one of the things, and I was obviously wrong, that the voters of Texas would hold against Cruz forever was going to Cancun.
During that, it was a terrible hurricane,
It was some horrible storm where the grid collapsed and everybody was out of power. Does anybody even talk about, that's a pretty heinous act and a pretty big abandonment of your constituents, don't you think?
Brian has a better word for
Odious?
Ted Cruz than
What is
odious.
it?
Yes, oleaginous.
Oh, that's a good one, too. That means like greasy and
Yeah.
slimy and
Do you
whatever.
remember reading in high school or grammar school Uriah Heep? Was it David Copperfield, I think? You know how he was described?
No.
Unctuous.
Well, that's pretty good, too.
That's a good word,
Unctuous
too.
is a really good word.
Unctuous is a good
How do you
word.
spell oleaginous? Can you spell it?
Oleaginous.
Well, you're reading it. Of course
That's
I
right.
could do it if I was reading it, too.
If you asked me and I wasn't reading it, Jim, I wouldn't be spelling it for you. Let me tell you right now.
O-D-I-O-U-S.
O-L-E-A.
Whatever. I was talking about odious. Goodbye.
Oh,
We're done.
odious. I got that.
We're
Unctuous,
done.
too. Do you want to spell unctuous?
U-N-C-T-I-O-U-S?
That's very good,
Thank
Jim.
you very much.
Very good. Jim did well on the college boards.
Only the unctuous can spell unctuous.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, we
I know
are
what
done
they're thinking.
for today. Thank you very much for listening today to the Boston Public Radio. Thank you to people that came down to the Boston Public Library. Tomorrow, what are we doing tomorrow? We've got GBH reporters Jen McKim and Sarah Betancourt in their latest investigation into labor trafficking in Massachusetts. I saw that on your television show. It was really appalling. National security expert Juliet Kayyem, two of the makers of Frontline's latest film documenting Russian war crimes in Ukraine, GBH's arts editor Jared Bowen, and Harvard media researcher John Donovan. She is an expert on meme wars, and that's the name of her new book, Meme Wars. We're going to talk to her about that. I want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Mackenzie Farkas. Additional support provided by Brendan Deedy, Gia Orsino. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker. Our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. We want to thank our BPL team as well, Steve Baracci and Evelyn Brito. What is on TV tonight, Jim Browdy?
Well, Bob Cordy, former justice on the state's highest court, has done a bunch of good things. One of the things now, he's on an international group of 6 lawyers who are consulting with Ukraine to clear up the corruption in their judiciary. And he's got a really interesting story to tell. In addition to Cody Keenan, was the chief White House speechwriter for Barack Obama. He's joining me tonight. His book is called Grace. It is fabulous. It's about 10 days, beginning with the killings at the church in Charleston, ending with him singing Amazing Grace. In the same week, decision on the Affordable Care Act, decision on same-sex marriage. It is brilliant. And we're going to talk about his relationship with Obama and Obama himself tonight at 7 o'clock.
I'm Marjorie Egan.
I'm Jim Browdy.
Thanks again for tuning in today. Hope you can tune in tomorrow and hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks.